Okay.
So click on this post. I just put it in the chat window.
All right.
And I was just going through like the timeline, looking for things that would resonate with what I was going to suggest. And this one's not obviously about God, which is weird because I clicked on it because I was just more like, oh, what is this one about again? I wanted to read it again, and it's talking about God. I'm like, oh, okay, cool.
Unconscious Neo.
But yeah, exactly. But this part right here is really cool.
Which part?
Screen share?
Yeah, you want to screen share?
Sure.
You know what I just found out you can do? You can split the screen into two. So you can have like Zoom on one side and you can have other shit on the other side.
Like your own stuff on one side?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't like it when you have to like try to get that thing to drop down. You're like, come on.
Yeah.
And it's like covering shit up. I'll have to look at that. Okay, so
side by side mode. Oh.
What's really cool is, for example, I really like this statement here. The justification that the love of God is imprinted on each child with the justification that apparently man did not create this world. And there must be a higher force that did this. And then there was another one I saw in here too.
With evil and all.
This one.
I was gonna read it too.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Did I cover it up or something?
Yeah. With like
no.
all right at the end of that sentence.
You just didn't finish
which like tops it off. It makes the whole thing different. Yeah.
I thought there was something about intelligence. Maybe I was thinking about a different one.
It's right beneath it. It's beneath the one you just read.
Intelligence, and will create the God intelligence character as a character with all the presence and energy required to take on this.
Oh, there it is. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I was looking for one.
Asif, that finally comes in handy.
Hey, okay.
First good use of it.
Here's what popped out with me on this part. Okay. Popped out for me when I read that. I was like, oh, parents don't consider it's my responsibility to figure out how to make my child as intelligent as literally physically possible.
Yeah.
Like almost like the existence of God as this higher intelligence means, well, there's that and then there's all of us.
Yeah.
But it's like I don't look at it like that with our kids. Like Katie and I don't look at it that way. We look at it as, how do we make them like understand everything? Even if we don't know everything yet. How do we get them to understand at least what we know and be able to go beyond?
Yeah.
Because obviously we didn't grow up with this. So we had, 20 plus years of basically wasted time. So our kids are getting not just what we know and everything from us, but then they're getting the tools, the vocabulary to be able to take everything and go further with it. You know what I mean? And faster. So it's like, imagine at 8 or 9 or whatever age, and my kids are reading this stuff, because I'm thinking about myself. Like when I was a teenager, I would have totally been into this. Like thinking of, because that's what the kind of stuff I was always thinking about anyways. I'm like, I want to understand reality. And like, I always just thought about the ideas people gave you. And I was like reading books about relativity theory, because it was like, that seemed to be more interesting than the other normal random stuff that people tell you. So I was always kind of investigating like what was possible or what was the cutting edge of information, at the
How much did you look at
level.
religion?
Say again?
How much did you look at religion?
How much, like when I was a kid or just
like when you're studying and I guess, teenagehood, young adult life.
Well, I went to a Catholic school. When I was before high school, the only exposure I had to religion was just my family, but they didn't really make us go to church or anything. Although we would go to church, and my family's like, Southern, so they're all Christian and all that stuff. But no one was really ever telling me like, you need to believe in God or anything. Now, I'm not saying no one was saying that, but I don't remember that. I don't remember anyone telling me like in my family, you need to believe in God. But my grandparents totally accept God as existing. They accept Jesus, all that stuff. But no one was, at least, and maybe that's because my mom and I was always like moving around a bunch. So I was never like in one place with people like, teaching me stuff. So mostly I didn't have anyone sitting down with me trying to teach me like about God or something. But when I would go visit my grandparents in North Carolina, they would put on these VHS tapes, which were like Bible stories. So my brother and I would watch these Bible stories all day, you know, but I never had this personal thing of like, oh, I need to believe in, like, there's a God, there's Jesus. I believed it. It was just, to me, obviously stories. All right. And when I remember I was probably like 8 or 9, something like that. Maybe a little bit older, like 9 or 10 or 11, something in that age range. I remember laying in my bed. I think it was in my bunk bed. And I don't know why this thought came to me. I was probably just thinking about something. And I was like, you know, people actually believe that when they die, they go to a place called heaven. Like, people actually believe there's a place somewhere up there that you go to. And I remember thinking about, like, I was becoming aware that people think this, right? And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, that's so dumb. Like, that obviously, I was like, it's obviously not true. It was obvious to me, right? Common sense, right? Common sense.
Hey, I was one of those kids.
What?
I was one of those kids that was like, yeah, when you die, you go to heaven or hell. Like, I remember.
Yeah, man, me too.
But maybe you guys had people telling you that.
Oh, for sure.
For me, it was more like I was hearing these things, but I wasn't being told these things, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Right? So I think I had an advantage from that perspective.
You want to stop the screen share, Cam?
Oh, yeah.
People can see.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Faces.
So,
yeah, go ahead, Jake.
For me, like, it's interesting because I was one of those kids because one day my mom took me to a church play production from like a pretty big church around here in Central Florida. And they had this huge production that was basically about, it's called like the Gates of Heaven and the Flames of Hell, something like that, right? And within it, they have all these stories where, you know, like somebody dies and then this is what happens after they die. And they go to heaven and this is what happens, or they go to hell and this is what happens. And then when they go to hell, like, they had flames on the stage. It was a really well done production. And they had like this spooky, scary, like, this voice that's distorted as the devil, and like this devil character would come out and everything. And it was just like, it was really scary, especially to my 4-year-old brain. And at that moment I made the decision. I was like, oh, okay, I got to just do whatever these people say so I can go to heaven. You know, whatever it takes to get to heaven, I don't want to go to hell. And from that, like, I solidified, like, that's how I based that was my starting point for thinking about religion in general. It wasn't really from a place of like, let me just consider this and see if this makes sense and things like that. It was more so from the place of, okay, don't want that. Whatever I have to do to get this, I'll do it. So it's, you know, like you said, yeah, people were telling me like this is.
How old were you when that stuff was going on?
About 4 years old.
Right. So from a very young age, you were heavily being impulsed with fear and stuff. You didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
From that perspective, you know what I mean? Like, as a child, innocent, like, you had no choice really but to, like, well, fuck if that. I mean, think about it. And this is part of the whole point is we're exploiting the innocence of children because they don't know what reality is. They don't understand how it works. They don't have that vocabulary yet. So, like, for example, with our kids, when I'm reading a book to Max, if there's something that's physically not possible that they talk about in the book, I'll ask him first. I would say, like, do you think that that's real or that's more pretend? And he'll tell me. And if he were to say, well, I think it's real, I would explain to him why it isn't and what the context is that he would need to understand. So I don't lie to him, because if I lie to him, then he'll be dumb. Like, he'll believe stuff that isn't true, which will mean he'll easily believe other stuff that's not true. You know what I mean? And if I really don't understand something, I'll tell him, you know, I actually don't really fully understand that, Max. Why don't we go, you know, if it's late at night, why don't we tomorrow go watch some videos and investigate it and research it a little bit and learn more about it? You know, I'll tell him that. There's nothing wrong with saying I don't understand a specific thing, so let's build our vocabulary. Then he learns, like, it's okay not to know something, and then there's a solution to that, right? But the idea that you should just let children believe, and believing is magical and all this stuff, it's just an excuse to abuse them, really.
You made this point. I don't know if it was the last podcast or if maybe we were just talking, but it was like this idea that what we have in our mind doesn't line up with physical reality. So when we try to do stuff in this world, it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Because we all got programmed to believe that if we believe, then it's true. And it's like, believing in Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny. It's like, if you say it, then I guess it's real. Like if you talk about it, then it's real. And it's like, that got me so good because I was like, oh man, I 100% just kind of was like, okay, like there's some, yeah, it's just like, okay, if Santa Claus is real and, all the movies is like everybody has to go out and believe hard enough and then the sleigh starts working or whatever. It's like a Christmas miracle and all that stuff.
Yeah.
It was like, damn.
How does a child know that that's not actually real? How do they? Like,
they don't.
Because if you already were born knowing how physical reality works, why would you go to school and like take science classes? Like, clearly you need to be told these things. So if you're telling a child from a young age with also all of the positive feelings, you see what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what's like, it's like getting in so that information is getting connected with all these positive feelings. So then they don't want to let go of that information later. Because it's like, I'm losing this feeling that I was given. So it's literally abusing the child's ignorance and innocence to, get them to accept things that are not true at all. And then we get upset later when they can't perform in school and they can't understand, basic mathematics or basic science, right? Because what does the scientific method require? Is that you put your hypothesis to the test. You have to try to disprove it. Basically, you look at, okay, here's what I think it is. How can I set up something to prove it wrong? Because if I can't prove it wrong, maybe it's more likely true. And then I'll try to find another way and another way and another way. But how often do people apply that same type of thinking to the concept of God or their religious beliefs?
Not at all. It's
They
a
don't.
completely different line of thinking, right? So the point that you were making earlier about people believing that intelligence comes from there's a higher intelligence. And so then you don't have to give your child the full intelligence of everything that they need to be in this world and actually understand reality. It's also something it correlates with something that I read earlier today. And that's from later on in the same blog about equality. And equality in this system is actually determined by your place of birth. And so you become equal to your environment. You become equal to the things that are around you. So if you're born in starvation in Ethiopia, you become equal to starvation. That's what you'll know. But it's also at the same point, if you're born into an elite family, that's what you become equal to, and that's what you'll know. But I've also noticed within that, those two things can't relate to each other. And so the extremely wealthy person doesn't understand the mindset of the extremely impoverished person, right? And in the same way, obviously, the impoverished people don't understand the mindset of the wealthy people, because otherwise they wouldn't be living generation to generation in poverty without any changes whatsoever, And it also reminds me of that story of, I guess it's Marie Antoinette, who said, "Let them eat cake," right? And I don't know if that's a true story or if it was made up for those times.
But that's what's in all of our heads, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know that story.
Do you know that story?
There's a quote. I don't know the actual story.
Okay, so supposedly she was a French ruler, maybe queen, I don't know. Maybe not queen, but French ruler, high up in society in France. And this was during the time when people were starving in France, and they were asking her, they said, "We have no bread." And her response was, "Well, let them eat cake." And the idea behind the story is that she was so removed from that society that she thought, because you have bread usually, and then you have cake, and then you have whatever. And so she thought, well, if they don't have any bread, it's okay. The etiquette, I know.
Go on to the next course.
Go on to the next course. Exactly. And so when they heard that, they were like, she doesn't get us. She doesn't understand us. Off with her head. That's supposedly the story.
Of course, it could have been fake news. Who knows?
It could have been
But
fake
it still gets embedded into all of our consciousness. Like
Oh,
the
shit.
elite don't relate to us, right?
Right.
But I mean, it's the same thing as I said before with the Santa Claus thing. You as an elite who has all these things just coming to you easily, it's like, well, if I question the system, or if I put myself in these people's shoes, then I'm going to lose what I have here on the positive side.
Oh yeah.
You know? Which is really just the essence of fear. It's a fear of loss. That's why we don't want to go there. Same thing with God. Like, so here, let me ask you guys, because I really want to hear y'all's perspectives, because obviously I've kind of come to conclusions. I've thought about this, but I don't really know where each of you kind of are sitting with the information. Why is it important to people that we all agree most people's idea of God is, whether it's a person type thing or an energy or a force, it's something that exists, which is in a way beyond what I am individually, which creates this universe, this reality, takes responsibility for it, and in a way makes sure that everything works out okay in the end. Right?
Yeah.
And that basically I don't have to worry too much about reality, because something that's way beyond me is taking care of it. There is some, whether it's an individual or it's just all of us collectively, there's some kind of higher intelligence, like we said earlier. I mean, I think that pretty much sums up everybody's idea of God, right? And then of course you have the atheists, right, who are like, there is no God. God doesn't exist. Like, it's just this earth, and we're humans, and we're just dirt, and we evolved into these things that we are now, and it's just the best we can do for now, and it's survival of the fittest, right? Which of course I would suggest that they believe in the concept of evolution is God, right? Meaning evolution is that driving force that's making everything get better in some way, and it's what's taking care of it, and any kind of randomness or disorder and all of that is just a part of all of that, you know. So they don't necessarily believe in this higher power that's taking care of everything, but they also believe there's no consequence.
Yeah. One
So-
interesting
so,
part of
yeah.
that is how atheism is one side of the coin.
Yeah,
Theism, or belief in God, is another side of the coin.
for sure.
But as it relates to what they think happens at the end of life, either nothing happens, or, you know, God's taking care of everything and you're going to be forgiven and you're going to heaven or hell, and everybody thinks they're going to heaven. So in both cases, it's nothing matters here in this life because I'm going to go out to the afterlife, or nothing matters here in this life because we're just a speck of dust floating on this ball, blah, 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 blah. So nothing matters because when I die, just let the
Right.
lights turn off and that's a wrap.
Right.
It's interesting how they both equal to that.
Well, and so what I see is within both of them, whether you actively believe God does not exist, as that thing we talked about, or you believe there is God, the question is, what's the starting point for why you're here and why you're alive and what you think the purpose of being here is. And so what I find is people who are vehemently religious or vehemently atheist still just supporting the system that exists on this earth as it is, without any sort of individual responsibility towards it, other than saying, well, each person's individual for basically being a good, decent person. So at the end of the day, that's what the atheist tends to argue, as well as the person who's religious, is like, I have a personal responsibility to be moral and a good person. And what I find is that religious people tend to, you know, I mean, obviously I'm not talking to all religious people. I'm primarily talking to people here in America, generally speaking, Christian or Muslim. So I know there's other religions like Buddhism, for example, but it all comes down to the same thing, because even within Buddhism, I think the overarching argument is that, well, all you can do is basically detach yourself from the suffering here on earth and in your life and reach a state where you just don't care about it anymore. And then you become realized and all this stuff. So it's still not, yes, life on this earth is shit for most people. I have a responsibility to change what's on this planet. That's the only reason I'm here. And there's nothing else. And even if there was, it doesn't really matter because I'm here right now. So I have to take responsibility for it. Like, I'm actually here. And no religion says that. And any religion that does, at some level, it's always taking some point where it'll accept something within the system where, okay, things can't become perfect. So the idea of perfection is just, it exists. Yeah. there is something that's perfect in this universe, but it's nothing that's tangible or obvious to anybody. So then what's the point of it? What's the practicality of it? Right. So I'm curious for you guys, like, what do you see as, why do people believe in God then? Whether it's atheism or not, why do people accept this idea of God? What purpose does that serve in their own personal life?
I don't think anyone's, at least for me personally, I hadn't found anyone who had a comprehensive take on it that's actually empowering. Meaning I grew up Christian with a lot of questions, like, you mean all these non-Christian people somehow aren't going to heaven even though they're good people? So I questioned that. But then I thought that, like, the whole nihilistic nothing really matters type thing, but that is incredibly disempowering, because that's like, well, what's the point of even being alive? But I had always had a lot of trouble with that idea of original sin, and just accepting that we're fundamentally flawed. But now I see that we are fundamentally flawed, in the sense that right now, the current world system, that where we get born into, it is flawed. But as this life force, we can take responsibility for that and work through it. And that's what's been cool to really come to grips with over the past few months. I see that the best definition that I've come to understand of what God is the physical universe, like life substance, like everything that's here. That is God. And I am part of that. And I'm equal to that. And so therefore I have the same powers that this creative force has. And if I want this whole life thing to be perfect, well, then it's on me to perfect myself. So that's been my current understanding with it. And that's been the most empowering. And that's where I've seen the most change happen in my life. And that goes back to the parts of the message of Jesus that I think are really valid. Like, love your neighbor as yourself, and the kingdom of God is within you. And
kingdom of heaven, I think.
Kingdom of heaven's within you. And that's really cool, because I now see that there are other people who have a similar mentality, where we can all see each other, in a sense, as God's, creative forces that can all work together to then make this be heaven on earth. So that's my current take.
I want to hit a couple points on what you said there. Okay, start with the original sin part, because I made a post on Facebook the other day about this, right, to see kind of what people's reactions would be, right? And it's funny because most people could not process what I was saying, because I said pretty much what you said. I just expanded a little bit more, because it was in writing, and I said we're all born in original sin, which means that we're born into an environment that isn't best, that immediately teaches us things that are incorrect, and we start living that and copying it and become the embodiment of it. And then a lot of people argue with me, how dare you teach someone that they have original sin? That's so terrible for them, and all this stuff. And so this is the point that I want to really get clear is it. When people think, okay, I have original sin, what we tend to think that means is with what I am, who I am, is fundamentally flawed, cannot ever change. It's just, no matter what, it's always going to be shit. And so I therefore need something beyond me that's perfect to take the place of perfection in my life and make things perfect, because I can never do that. Versus the person who says, I am a God, I am a goddess creator, and I am infinite and powerful, and like literally everything I'm already doing is already perfect and great, which is what I, you know what I mean? You guys see this, right? Like the other, which is just the same thing, because it's not saying you need to change anything. But what we're suggesting is that we're not inherently flawed. We're just making mistakes, and we're not learning and realizing, like, oh, this is the thing that needs to change. Okay. And if we say, well, I am inherently flawed, I'm inherently sinful, etc., then that's because you believe you can't change.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you say, well, I don't need to change, I'm already an infinite creator and all this stuff, that means you don't need to change. So what we're saying is you can accept that, hey, I'm doing things wrong, but I can forgive myself. I can look at what needs to be corrected, and then I can live that correction into physical reality where I automate it within myself. I trust myself. I never have to worry about making that mistake again. And if it comes up in another form, I trust myself enough to look at it and direct it in that particular form. And if everyone did that, like you said, Mitch, then things would, the kingdom of heaven would come from within, and it would be without. It would be expressed without. Right? But that idea that everyone takes and twists it, the kingdom of heaven is within. That just means to most people, all I have to do is meditate. All I have to do is feel positive. All I have to do is just imagine that everything is great in my life, and that's what'll happen. In other words, they think it means to go inward and just become selfish.
Stay there. Yeah.
And stay there, exactly. And then treat your neighbor as yourself. Treat your neighbor as yourself, love your neighbor as yourself, however you want to express it, becomes just like, I mean, to oversimplify it, just smile at people. You know what I mean? Give the homeless person $50, because the person, you know, we don't realize yet as individuals fully that we can fundamentally change, and we can no longer accept, we don't have to accept a system as a reflection of the belief that we are fundamentally flawed. Because if you were to ask the average person, can the system that, you know, economics, politics, and everything get to a point of perfection where everybody has what they need, what do you think the average person is going to say?
Impossible.
It's not possible. There always will be corruption. There will always be people who are this. There will always be this. There will always be that. There will always be poverty. That is the external reflection built into the system. That's the internal reflection of that actual belief in original sin. So the people who say they have original sin, obviously they're part of the problem. People who say they don't have it are also part of the problem. It's only the ones who say, I realize I came into this world, I got fucked up because this environment, like you said, Drake, you become equal to that. Okay, now that I've become equal to it, I can understand it and I can take responsibility for it. That's why I'm here, right? So instead of taking this idea of God as this external thing that's going to create everything for us, what would God do if he were walking in your shoes? If literally God was born to your parents and had a totally clear picture of, okay, this is like, I'm not biased. I don't need to create some imaginary fantasy of like a movie in my head about who I'm becoming, and I'm going to have this job and this career and this kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Like this picture idea. If they were literally just like, no, I'm God. I'm in this fucked up situation. What can I do to change it fundamentally?
Everyone's praying to me to take responsibility for it. Everyone's praying to me to take care of them. Everyone's praying to me to give them the faith and the courage and all that stuff. Do you imagine in terms of the responsibility that?
Yeah, well, I mean, what most people probably don't want to accept, I would assume, is that the idea of God existing is what is going to create slavery to continue existing.
Wow.
And it's funny because the real slave is God. Isn't it? Because imagine, like you just said, you have to take responsibility for everybody. You're like, fuck, gotta go fix that problem again. Gotta go fix that problem. And then, you know, have you all heard this idea that people say, because I've heard all the objections, because I like to push back and I hear the objections, right? And it's like, well, God gave us free choice, so he can't control us into doing whatever, right?
Right.
But then wouldn't his expectation be that you would become like him? You know what I mean? If he gave you free choice, what was the point of it? Wouldn't it be to become perfect? And I know I'm saying him, and some people think it's God's beyond him and all this bullshit. But
God's a her. Clearly.
It's a her. It's like, okay, it's not real anyway, so it doesn't matter what I call it. All right?
Yeah.
But my point is,
what do you? Yeah. Go ahead with your point, and then I.
Well, no. What did you want to ask me?
Well, I've had conversations recently with people too, where they've said, well, who are we with our limited human minds or whatever, you know, just as a human, how am I supposed to comprehend just how magnificent God is? Like God is beyond words. God is beyond comprehension. And that one, because you're right, we are humans, right? I don't know what life is like.
That's what I say about Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Well, my
first
objection handler on that would be like, well, if you're so fucking stupid, then isn't it obvious that this imaginary product of your mind, if there's some perfect being that exists somewhere, is the product of a retarded, stupid mind?
Wow, that actually makes sense.
How, like, you're imagining something that's not possible. So why would you trust your own? If you don't trust your own reasoning, why would you trust your own reasoning?
Okay, so to this point, and also to a point that you were making earlier about like we need to become equal to the system. Like we're born into whatever environment that we're born into. We become equal to that environment, but we don't become equal to the entire environment, as in this entire world. And that's where we're fucked up, because we become equal to just this small environment and we separate ourselves from every other environment. Just like the rich, they're separating themselves from everyone else. The poor, they are not even able to understand, or the undereducated, let's say, they're not even able to understand what everybody else is doing. They can only understand what's going on in their environment. And that's the biggest problem, because we become more and more separated in our own minds, and which separates us from this world and reality as a whole. Right.
Right.
And
which is why the key is to educate each person to the point where their vocabulary, like we talked about on the last one, is equally effective. So even if I'm born into this environment right here, I still understand and can relate to all the other points that exist in reality. And then of course, the point beyond that would be to then equalize all the environments, so that even if I'm born in this place or this place, they may be different. You might experience them differently, but the quality of your experience isn't any less because you're in that one. Or you don't necessarily have to be in that one if it is a lower quality experience for some reason. Like you're there because you're wanting to improve it or something like that, right? So it might be difficult for some who are listening and saying, well, 'cause, in other words, it's so ingrained in our minds, in our consciousness, to just accept that things are the way they are and they cannot change. But the reason why the God point is so critical to look at for yourself and be self-honest about is that's what's holding it all in place. It's like creating a hope within you that it'll all work out and I don't have to change it, but also the excuse that because there exists this higher intelligence that's infinitely beyond me, like I think it was Mitch, I think Mitch, you just said it, like, well, therefore I can't even get close to approaching solving the problem. Well, yeah, you as an individual can't, but what are you saying? Like, you can't even use basic common sense? Because that's really all we're talking about. I don't think anything that we're looking at in terms of changing this world requires godlike intelligence. It's a cop-out. It's a total cop-out to say there must be some intelligence that's way beyond us that could to be able to figure out the problems in this world. It's like, well, let's just start with the basics. Like we always say, okay, well, what is best for all? Well, how could you possibly determine what's best for every single person? Like, and it's like,
yeah,
okay. Then like, I think you said this before, Drake. Well, does every child need clean drinking water?
Right.
Like, yes. Okay. Did it require God to figure that out? Or was that basic common sense? Let's just take care of all the things we can agree on first. Right. And then, yes, there is a point, I would say, where we do need to become more intelligent, but I don't think it's an intelligence that's outside of our grasp. It's just an intelligence that we're not giving to everybody, which is an equally effective, optimized vocabulary. That is something that's within our, especially now we have TechnoTutor, we have all the support, we have DIP with all the points of what is the vocabulary you require to understand yourself, to change yourself, all these points. It's not vocabulary and understanding that's outside of the realm of human possibility. It's just not something that we're giving to everybody. That's really the problem. And the concept of God being the thing that takes responsibility is going to stop people from then taking that next step of, oh, I can become responsible.
Yeah.
So then, I was going to say,
okay. This is pretty cool, because I used to think that, and I'd heard this before, that there's this, this God-like intelligence thing, but that's like, what's it within nature? What makes a ecosystem regenerate? What, makes if you really investigate nature and what's going on, it's profound, like how intelligent the earth itself is. Yeah. And I had always thought of, well, that's like this intelligence, this godlike intelligence that's beyond a human. But I just realized right there, it still gets broken down into vocabulary, and we can still investigate it through the scientific method and just being aware of what's going on, and then working together. Because like, if you ever looked at the mycelial network, oh yeah, it's insane. It's like nature's version of the internet, where you step on one piece of soil and it's it's like communicating to all the trees around it and everything. It's like, damn.
Okay,
Like,
but look, is that where the problem is existing?
No.
Where is the problem in this world that we're really talking about taking responsibility for existing?
Within humans.
it's within the human
system.
mind, and then the human system.
And is it a lack of knowledge, or is it a lack of starting point? Well, a lack of starting point is probably a bad way of phrasing it. But what I mean, is it an incorrect start? Meaning, what is the starting point of each person individually in the system? Is to generate energy, to generate profit. To profit, meaning my purpose on this earth is to generate and accumulate profit for myself, and to accumulate more and more and more and more and more. Instead of my purpose, my starting point is to be here, to give as I want to receive, to be live in a balanced way, and to then find ways to improve that balance without detracting from anybody. They're just two different starting points. It's not a different knowledge. And I mean, we can learn more. We can improve our knowledge. I'm not saying that as humans, we should stick with just the knowledge that we have and never go beyond that, and never understand even more deeply, like how does the mycelial network actually communicate and things like that. But that's not where the level of our current problems exist. You see what I mean? And why does it take God to solve those problems?
So I was thinking about the starting point that you'd mentioned before about, okay, this is the way the world is, just accept it. It can't change. It's too big to change. All these things, all these excuses that everyone has. Who does that benefit? Because it doesn't ever benefit the individual that's saying that, right?
No.
It does benefit self-interest, but the weird thing about self-interest is it's selfish, and it doesn't actually work out to your best benefit, because then you end up having to defend your self-interest and defend, the lifestyle that you might have or not have or whatever. And just that starting point is given to everyone individually by, you could say, by the system, but it's because parents are sharing that, because that's what they got when they came into this world. It's what I assume everyone probably gets this same line of thinking of, that's just the way things are. It's not going to change. It's too big to change. Sorry. Maybe, sometimes parents will say, maybe you can change it, but they say that really, I think, facetiously, just like, well, I'm just going to entertain that thought, but it's not real, in the same way that parents always tell their kids, you could be the president, knowing damn well 99% of those kids are never even going to come close to even being in politics,
Well, how is it even practically possible if there's millions of children alive today?
Yeah.
They're not going to be alive through another 12 I don't know how many numbers, you have to do the math, but 12 times 4 is 48. So you could do the math, right?
Yeah.
7, whatever, 12 presidents, whatever, do the math, right? But my point is, how can every child on the planet, or in the US, for example, be president?
They can't.
But they say anybody can be president.
No, they can't.
No. So why would we impulse every child to have the dream of being president? Do you know how many astronauts there are? Like a dozen or something.
Yeah.
There's not that many.
Yeah.
It's not more than 100 or whatever. So, but why do we try to get every kid to want to be an astronaut? Why do we want every child to want to be an Olympic athlete? Like these dreams where it's like you only require a few people in that dream, whether the dream is valid or not, and the actual thing is valid or not. But again, that's a consequence of, it's not even a consequence. What I mean is it's evidence of this whole thinking of just getting the child to focus on shit that's not real, that doesn't matter. And then getting upset, older generations getting upset that younger generations for being stupid and for being lazy and being selfish and all this stuff. And it's like, who raised them? Who is accepting the thing in the first place?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Based on that, it's like, it talks about people being created in the image and likeness of God, right? And if you think about it, like, the closest definition that I found to God was like the human flesh. Like, it knows everything about us. Like, it could experience everything in existence here. And then another thing is, like, if let's say that's the case, we're basically doing is what it's describing God does. So like, if we have a thought, we decide we should be a certain way, we end up creating like our children exactly like that. And then we end up just creating the things in the world exactly like that too. You know what I mean? So like, let's say like we have this belief about something, then we end up creating it in the world.
Right.
Like, that's exactly what happens. Like
So
who's
let's take
doing
it
that
as
to
we
us?
are God, right?
Basically,
We are God.
like,
We have beliefs. We have a starting point. We reflect it in the world. That is our image and likeness. Right?
Exactly. That's exactly, yeah.
Instead of
so-
us being the image and likeness, that's actually how we're creating, is by creating images and things based on what's our starting point.
To hammer home really why we all end up as children, like being impulse so much with God, is because obviously from our parents, they create that in us. Parents and other authoritative figures in our life that we see as, oh, you've been here before, you've been on this planet, I'll listen to you. And it all just comes back to the main things that all of marketing is based on, all of buying stuff is based on, all of society is based on, is fear and hope. And the very manifestations of that is heaven and hell, right? And I remember me and Kian, because we were raised Muslim, and we had this uncle that I remember from, very, very young. And he just accentuates the point the most. This was happening all the time. Of like, when you go to hell and you get put in the hellfire, it's so hot it burn all your skin off, and then they put your, somehow, I don't know if God does it or what, but they put your skin back on to burn it back off, burn you into skeletons, and they'll have torture machines that pulls your body apart, and there's things that come out your back and all this stuff. Do you remember that stuff?
Yeah, man, that was a really good motivator.
Yeah.
I feel like there's some people who would be like, damn, that sounds fun.
Jesus Christ.
Like,
I
think
don't
about
know
it.
what
If you could
friends
just
hang
keep
out with.
dying over and over and keep experiencing, they'd be like, that would be fun, man. I want to try that out.
Dude, I was
Like, okay, like if there was a virtual
terrified.
reality,
I was terrified. I was a
terrified.
child, Cameron.
Sure, we're
what I'm
doing
saying,
it,
if there
kid.
was a
Yeah.
virtual reality simulator,
Yeah,
okay,
you
where
could
you
do
could
that.
literally go in and experience your flesh being burned off over and over, don't you think there would be people who'd want to do it?
A
There's
very
that
small
book.
subset.
There would be people, I
What
guarantee.
book?
Yeah, they'd probably try it.
That book, who's it by? Man,
Drake
Metamorphosis of Prime Intellect.
Oh yeah. Metamorphosis of Prime Intellect. It's a good
Yeah.
book. If you haven't read it, it's really good.
Yeah,
It's kind of along those same lines.
that's a feature within the
It's like, in other words, if you know you can't die, if you're gonna live forever, you're gonna get eventually bored, and you're gonna be like, how can I?
Do everything fucking.
Yeah, exactly. Experience
Yeah.
everything. Right?
So that's what some people think is going on, though, where they're like, well, fuck the situation on Earth. It's a simulation.
yeah.
Isn't that fucked?
But even more interestingly, there's people who believe, like what you were just saying, Asif, that that's actually a place, right? This hell place, right? It's actually a place you go there and this happens to you, right? So my question as a child, this is how I would have thought of things. What's like, so how do you get there? Like, what's the physical, mechanical process that you use to get to that place? And the
I
person
remember,
has
yeah.
no idea.
I remember you brought that where comes in that concept of the soul. But you were talking about, like a year ago or so, we were just talking, and you're like, people think that we go to some, like there's Earth and there's the universe and all that stuff, but when you die, you go to some completely different, like, put that all aside, it's like you're in a completely new fucking place. And I used to picture that you're on clouds, or 7 heavens or 9 or some shit like that, and you can look down at the heavens below you and you can see the people. They used to tell me in Islam, like, well, not in Islam, I didn't study Islam per se, I just heard it secondhand information,
Okay.
right? Because I never really read the Quran, but what I was told was like you know the people in heaven you can see into hell, right? And I remember my cousin, like,
Why would you want to?
I know, but there was like these
you
loopholes.
could see the peasants.
Like,
Yeah, wouldn't you just feel
The
bad all the
loopholes-
time? You're like, shit.
I'm
that's
telling
my
you,
brother.
man.
Fuck.
Me and Ken, we spent time thinking about the loopholes. I know my cousin's actually doing this. Of if you're a child and you die, you automatically go to heaven. But if you kill yourself, you go to hell. Just generally speaking.
Okay.
Remember, we were like, should we kill each other?
Right.
When you're children,
That's
you're
right.
like, dude,
Exactly.
fuck this. Why are
Yeah.
we waiting for? Like, let's just go to heaven right now.
And the thing is, when you go to heaven, you can bring like 1 or 2 people, or like 1 person.
You have a +1.
You get a +1. So I was like,
If they're already in hell, can they still be a +1?
Can I go to hell?
That's a
and
good
try to
question.
drag
That's a
one of
really
you
good
guys down
question.
with me?
well, I was saying it was like a mother and a child, and I was like, well, if you, it's because your child can't kill themselves, because that's kind of challenging. And she's like, no, because you go to hell. I was like, I thought of it. I was like, why don't you kill your child, and then he can +1 you.
Makes so much sense.
But the main thing is like, come back to that point is like, what Cameron was mentioning. He's like, we think we go to this like completely alternate reality, not just alternate reality, like a completely different fucking place. And, you know, I used to think, I'm like, yeah, I just have so much shit playing in my head of like, you go above Earth, or it's like, it doesn't even exist on Earth. It's some other thing. It's like some other reality. But it's like that, but that's why you need to believe in a soul and all that stuff. But people would describe to me what heaven was like, right? In Islam, it's like the greenest grass and the people, the rivers and the fish and all that beautiful stuff, right? And I was like, wait a second. And this is like, I'm talking about like in the last 2 years. So I was reflecting on that point. I was like, wait, so your body stays here, and the only reason you have your body is for your soul to be able to experience physical reality. Eyes, ears, mouth, you know, see, sight, hearing, touch, taste, smell. But you go into some other place, just your soul. Your soul leaves your body. And then you just get another body to experience all that again? Like, how do you know how things look and all that stuff?
Yeah,
you know?
that's a good point.
Hey, well, I just want to say it's funny to me that the Muslims believe that heaven is like a bunch of green grass, right? Because they're mostly all in like the deserts, right? But like the Christian people think that everything's just like gold.
Well,
pretty
you know,
telling.
it's funny. My grandma was telling me. I remember talking to my grandma about it, and like again, this is like a year or two ago, and she was saying, I was like, she's saying how there's servants to bring you stuff, and I was like, well, how do I know that if I go to heaven, what if I'm a servant? You know? Or is it like the best of hell becomes the servants? You know, it just became like. Remember when we were all
what's here on earth?
we were in Los
everybody
Cabos,
else.
right? We were in Los
Yeah.
Cabos.
Yeah.
It's like I was just thinking of that. Like there's
Wow.
beaches
Yeah,
and like
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
there's servants and buffets and all this stuff. You got the nicest, like whatever.
I mean, to be honest with you guys, like, didn't you kind of feel like you feel bad for the people, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So I'm not saying like I'm like just can't sleep at night, because I understand what's going on and I understand the situation. But I mean, there is that point self-honesty where it's like, this isn't as fun as it could be because these people have to be our slaves.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and imagine though, what you'd have to do within yourself to just be like, yeah, they are my slaves. Fuck them. Like,
Yeah.
they're just animals.
Oh, man,
Like, they
wow.
don't deserve what I have. Like I think there's a level of consciousness where it's like, that's how you feel at things.
Yeah.
That
And
must
I
be
was
how
talking
God
about-
feels about everything.
Yeah, I was talking to one of my cousins, and like that's a huge part of the philosophy for Muslims. It's like we're all here as slaves. We're here to serve God, right? And he wants to become like really successful. And I was like, okay, so are you a slave or are you going to be like a leader in this world? Which one are you? He goes, well, I'm a slave to God, but like he will take care of like X, Y, Z things. Like we're going through the details of what's going to be taken care of and what you actually have to do to like make a difference. And then it came to a point where he was just like, okay, you know what? Like, even if I don't do what I need to do, as long as I'm forgiven and pray and do all that stuff, like that's why I'm alive. That's pretty much going to be worth it in the end. And then I thought about it. I was like, well, man, like, look, if you just did everything you needed to do while you're here, like, wouldn't you be gifted heaven anyways? Like, if that was the case, you know, like if you just did everything that you're supposed to do, you try to make like the biggest impact possible. Like to an extent, we could just create like heaven on earth. Like we have enough food, we have enough water, we have all that stuff. So it's like, where are we going somewhere else for it? Like you have that now. And it's like, if God was here, wouldn't he just want to give that to everybody?
Yeah.
And then he was just like conflicted. Like it was like weird. Like, you know what I mean?
Cognitive dissonance.
Exactly.
Because
I
everyone's just
realized.
using the God thing to justify their pursuit of happiness.
Mm.
That's all.
I
it is.
remember being in that position, right? And it's like, can you notice like when, you know, we're having those kind of discussions with people, it's like, they're kind of just like, you can tell they're just kind of making it up as they go along.
Yeah, exactly.
They're like, well, in that case, then it's like they never really thought
Never
about it.
actually thought it through. Yeah.
Right.
But going back to what Cameron was saying in terms of adopting the knowledge necessary in order to take responsibility for what is here, the reason what I was going back to of being impulse so much with the fear and the hope, and you know, we got beat a lot in order to pray 5 times a day, and during Ramadan at the nighttime there's a certain prayer that it can go for like an hour to 2 hours
Damn.
at like 10 p.m. when you're like 13.
And this is your 5th one of the day?
It's actually
no,
like
just
an extra
oh
set
yeah,
after
there's
the 5, and that's after you
yeah,
didn't eat for the whole day.
Jeez.
Well, you get to eat at night. Yeah.
exactly. But it's like I remembered like asking for a chair and then being like, no, like those are only for the old people. I'm like, but there's no old people here. Like, it's just us. Like, why can't I just sit in the chair? And because you're allowed to pray from the chair if you're hurt or if you're, I'm like, I'm a child, man. Like, I didn't get it. You know, like my muscles couldn't take it. I would just be like doing like standing on one leg, standing on one leg and all that.
Damn.
But the point is, we got like even in our Quranic school to learn Arabic because it's a different language, right? It's like we used to get beat when we misbehave, right? And this is like what 10 years ago, you know, in Canada. Like the main thing is that the thing that it kind of goes hand in hand is like the fear impulse and the all that and the force and all that. That's what keeps us in that what Kian was talking about of like when you're talking to somebody and they're just not willing to think of something, consider that maybe that's not the case. Because when I was in that position, I was like, everything else, sure, but nothing changes my belief in God, no matter what. I can't prove it. Who cares? It's not about proof. It's just what it is. And you know, over time, I realized it's because so deeply embedded in me. It was like, if I don't, I'm going to go to hell in this huge volcano that's the hottest lava that I ever experienced, even though I've never even seen lava my entire life. And it's going to burn off on my skin repeatedly over and over again. And in this life, all my parents are going to disband me. My family's going to disband me. Like, no one will want to talk to me. You know, my cousins will freak out. And, like, you know, no one will trust me and all this stuff. And, like, I'm going to get beaten. And, you know, my uncle's going to, like harm me and all this stuff. But that's what's like playing in me as in terms of what is keeps me back from considering outside or using my logic, using my intelligence. Is like the points of abuse that were like, I can't, I'm not allowed.
Mm. This is like at a deep unconscious, subconscious level, not just for you, but for lots of people. And you can see how that's how it keeps the system intact, because then what is it that you're not willing to question also because of that? You know, like, let me ask you guys a question. Okay. I want to switch gears for a second. If you were to take on the mindset of God and so forth, right? Or even if you're an atheist, why does poverty exist?
Because, well, if you take on the concept of God, it's because God is using it to teach a lesson. As far as for an atheist, I would assume poverty exists because we haven't gotten our shit together or something to that effect. Like, there's no reason, or we just haven't figured it out yet. That's just the way life is.
Yeah, a common one that I hear from people who I think claim to be religious and so forth is, typically I hear this more from like the sometimes from the Christian perspective, but also even from like the spirituality new age, right? Where they take the concept of God to be something that's like the higher intelligence, energy, force kind of thing. Yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah. But I always hear this thing of, well, children suffer, poverty exists, things like this, because it's them expressing unconditional love by being in that situation, so it's allowing us to learn to be compassionate.
So I just got told that when they die, they're just going to go to heaven, so I didn't have to worry.
Oh, that would be their reward, right?
That's a convenient one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, it's funny when I shifted, you know, throughout my life, it was like Muslim, and then really like universe energy.
Yeah.
And I felt really, really good because there was a period of time when people were like, you know, do you believe in God? And I'd be like, no, like between that period. But one thing that made me feel really good, why I accepted the whole universe thing so emphatically, was because it reconciled the 2 points. Well, people would be like, do you believe in God? I was like, I don't see it as a being in the sky or whatever.
Yeah.
But what God really is the universe. And it's, you know, it's all that stuff. So if we, right. And so it reconciled things so nicely for me.
Yeah.
At the time, right?
That's why I wanted to bring it up, because you can go to, well, it's the universe. Okay. It's not, and that's not where I'm going with it. which is I think where most people try to get. It's like,
I have a
it's
different
the
answer.
universe. Yeah, Drake.
So my answer to what is God is your parents. Parents are God because they create another life form here. They give it the ideas that it has, which then continues the system, right? And so it's the parents who are the actual creators, who are creating the new life forms that are coming on this earth. And so it's happening at an individual level at each and every family, each and every home, regardless of who they are. All the parents are doing this, and they are doing it from the starting point of they might have the best intentions, but they don't understand reality. They don't understand how this world works. They don't understand why they're even doing the things that they're doing. They've just already accepted everything from their own parents, and it just continues and continues over and over and over again. And no one's taking the responsibility to take a step back and say, why does it have to be this way? Can we change it? Because like I said before, who is it benefiting? It's not benefiting me to say this can't change. It's too big to change. Or, that's just the way that life is. It doesn't benefit me. It doesn't benefit anyone that I know that I've spoken to and said, why can't we have a perfect world? Or at least a world where everybody's taken care of. Maybe not perfect. Sure. Okay. Whatever. But at least a world where everybody's taken care of, where you don't have to worry about food and shelter and water and education. Wouldn't that be completely different? And I see, as you mentioned before, cognitive dissonance. They just can't accept that. They can't get their minds to go there. Part of it, I think, is because there's this acceptance of the past determines the future. And so I can't change. And so because this happened in the past, why should I even consider that I can make a different decision today, right now? Because I had to grow up with it. You should have to grow up with it too, which is this really weird idea that a lot of people hold in their heads. But it's also that point of self-interest of, if I don't have to let go of my self-interest, that's what most people want. If I have to change, that means I have to let go of my self-interest. And then that means that I'm going to have to change if I want to see everybody else change. So no change. It's all good. I'm okay with this. That's the way I see it.
And you also see the people who believe in God, they blame everything on the people who don't believe in God. And the people who don't believe in God blame everything on people who do believe in God.
Yeah.
That's good.
You know? And so I want to handle the objections for, okay, let's say you believe in God. How can you then align with what's best for all? Okay. And then we can look at, if you don't believe in God, how can you align with what's best for all?
Well, that's easy.
So let's say that's easy. Let's say you believe in God. Okay. My question to somebody who believes in God would be, do you then believe that God would expect you to do what is best? Meaning, wouldn't God want you, if you're here, to take as much responsibility as possible and improve the world as much as possible? Or would he rather whatever you want to call it, rather you just go along with the way things are? So in other words, the common thing that I hear is that people say, well, there's God, and then there's our world, which is imperfect because it has human beings, and they're not choosing to be aligned with God, right? And that's why the world is the way it is. And everybody would accept and align with God, then what would be better? But it doesn't really matter because I'm going to go to heaven. Okay. But you are here. So what would it mean to be in alignment with God then? What would that actually practically mean? And if you take, for example, the principles of Jesus, and this is not trying to use someone's belief against them, like, oh, well, if you really believed in God, then you would do this. No, it's like, if God actually is a reality and the principles of Jesus actually apply, then how do you apply them to the utmost? How do you apply them to the degree that Jesus would want to? And here I notice you get to a common objection where people will say, well, Jesus was the only person who was perfect, and we can only be a flawed imitation of him, right? Like, he was the one that was perfect and I can't be perfect like him. Okay. So then the next question would be, so do you just then say, well, fuck it, I mean, I'm just going to go and sin all the time then? Like, there's no point to even attempt to do anything best. No, you don't do that. You say, well, no, I'm going to try to get close to Jesus, at least as close as I can. But then the question is, what is your limit within that? So in other words, what if you were able to look at all of the fears that you have, all of the emotional stuff, and you would be able to be honest with yourself and forgive yourself and actually let go of those things, and then see how much closer you can get to actually applying the principles that Jesus said, which was to love your neighbor as yourself. What would it mean to love your neighbor as yourself? Wouldn't that mean to, like, for example, if you have children and you don't feed them, can you say that you love them?
No.
If you have the ability to and you just don't do it, or if it's like within reach but you just don't make the effort.
Yeah.
So
No.
so isn't every person in this world our neighbor? Whether we realize that or not, it's clearly the case. You know, even if they don't live next door to you, even if you never see them, they're still your neighbor. They're still on the same planet. So if it was possible for us to put a system in place on Earth, you know, like Amazon Prime next day delivery system, that's what I mean by system, something that actually makes things happen in an automated, predictable way. If we were to put that in place and everybody could get fed, everybody could have clean water, everyone could have proper nutrition, everyone could get the best education possible. At a bare minimum, wouldn't that be love your neighbor as yourself without any limit? Like love literally every neighbor as yourself. Provide them with what you would want to provide your own children, or literally your next door neighbor.
One of the biggest recurring themes that I heard, whether it be Christianity or Islam or even the universe, that kind of deal, but especially within the context of my life, was in Islam, was that the bad things that happen to you or that you perceive as bad for the, you know, the universe thing that you perceive as bad, it's all just a test. That's what my uncles would say to me, my aunties and things like that. And, you know, when something happens,
a test for what?
God is testing you to see, you know, if you will still believe in God, even though all these bad things are happening in your life. You know, you just lost your job, whatever. That's a test. And what I had asked, I remember being in Australia and having an in-depth conversation for 3 hours. And this guy in like a hostel, he was a Sikh and he was there with his family. But one of the points I was like, so isn't the test to see what you would do if you were given this great life of being in the top 1% of the world, if you're making over $30,000 US a year? Like if you're living in a Western or first world country, isn't the test to see there's a bunch of people who you're indirectly abusing through your participation in a system that requires slaves? Or just to simplify that, it's like there's a bunch of people who do not have. Isn't your test of this life to see if you would step up and do whatever it takes to actually give as you want to receive? Because how can we trust you in any other reality of heaven or hell, whatever?
Yeah.
How could we trust you that you wouldn't just go over there and just start abusing everything? Oh, because I'd have everything for myself. Exactly.
That's a great point. Like if you found yourself in heaven, why would you have any reason to cause trouble? Because I've got everything I need. And that's brilliantly said, man, because it's like, what if we could create that here on Earth? Then there wouldn't be any more problems. You don't have any reason to. But let me ask you a question. Okay. Since you brought this point up, what do you think, if you're not willing to do what's best here, why would you?
You look so shady right now. The hat's covering your eyes.
I'll just do like this.
If you're not willing to do
if you're not willing to do what's best now on this planet, why would you do what's best then?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I guess you already answered it because you said, well, you wouldn't have any reason to.
That's a good way to frame it, yeah.
But then wouldn't the test be, even if you don't have everything you need, that you would still do what's best?
Yeah.
That should be the test. And I guess that's what you're saying. But what do people turn the test into? Like, what do you think your uncles, your aunties, what do you think they actually believed the test was?
Do the rituals.
Yeah.
It's just
keep your belief in this God thing.
Keep your faith. Yeah.
Yeah. Even if your relationship with your spouse sucks and you don't care enough to change yourself, even if your relationship with your children, with your parents, with, you know, like you're doing drugs, you're drinking, doesn't matter. Just do the rituals. Make sure you're doing that. Yeah.
How many, I mean, I guess we don't know the exact number. I'm sure we could look it up. How many Muslims are actually living in poverty though? Because you mentioned the 1%, the first world. But how many Muslims are actually living in real poverty?
So true.
And are utilizing that same reasoning to just not do anything about it?
Wow. Yeah.
You know, and what happens when it gets to a point for enough people in this world where it's such an extreme experience of pain? Like, in other words, they're already in physical hell right now. They're basically already having their skin burnt off because of, you know, not having food and all these things.
Or literal bomb.
Yeah, or literal bombs, or they have so much emotional instability within themselves that even though they have some basic stuff, but because everyone else doesn't, they have like this emotional pain inside of them because they were abused. So when we say basic needs, we don't only mean food, water, shelter. Those are obviously prerequisites, but also people should have like if you have food, shelter, and water, but then your father is constantly abusing you or your mother is constantly yelling at you and hitting you, you're still not going to be okay.
Right.
You're still going to have problems. So just because people in the first world have everything they need, you could say, well, but that proves it won't make any difference. But that's still in the context of a world where most people don't, which then creates a situation where to benefit from this situation in the first world, you have to accept this bigger situation and just live to make money. That is not a satisfying purpose. That in itself, you have to accept so much abuse and trauma in your life to think that that's a satisfying purpose. Just like you said earlier, to do the Muslim thing, you have to go through all this abuse and just accept, okay, there is a God. Fine. Okay. There's a God. I'll do the prayers. Fuck, stop hitting me. You know?
not every Muslim, but yeah, definitely.
But I mean,
because it gets woven a lot in culture.
Fear, though? Yeah, but still.
Because in heaven, when you think of being in heaven, it's like you don't have any fear of loss. You're not like, oh shit, if I do something wrong, then I'm going to lose my heaven status.
Well, wouldn't you have more reason to just go and be a fucking rapist then?
That's true. Yeah.
Like, no, think about it really though. If your starting point here on earth is, if you were honest with yourself, it's just to get satisfaction with energy. Then when you go to heaven where you have no fear of anything being taken away from you, why wouldn't you just become like mega rapist, make a psychopath? So that right there would show to you, you can't be trusted to be in heaven because you can't even be trusted in this earth where everything's fucked to not change your starting point. This is the whole point. So when I'm looking at for Christians or for Muslims or religious people who believe in God, my suggestion would be, how can you be trusted with the keys to the kingdom? How can you be trusted with instant manifestation, everything you want, paradise? If you're not able to be trusted in this life, and am I speaking to the children and the people who are suffering so much they can't even get enough food to eat? No, because fuck, how are they supposed to prove themselves? But the person who's benefiting from the system, where maybe they didn't get beaten as a kid for not believing in the religious stuff. Maybe everything's just fine in their life. But the reason you have money in your pocket, that creates a direct result somewhere else in the system where somebody goes without. And the fact that you're okay with that, why would I, if I were God, look at you and be like, oh yeah, you're one of my people. Come on up. That doesn't make sense. You know, and then would it be good enough for the person just to be like, well, I have money and I know it causes a problem, but I have compassion and I feel bad for those people. That's not what I'm looking for at all. Yeah. What I would be looking for as the God, I would be like, no, will you do something about it? Like, what did Jesus apparently do when he came to earth? He started to like tear shit up. He was like, no, flip the tables. Like, this isn't right.
Yeah.
Create a system that's best for everybody. But everyone was so low vocabulary, low processing that they freaking killed him. I'm not even talking about whether the guy was a god or anything. I'm just saying let's just say he is a guy who was like, hey, we need a system that's best for all. Because that's what I interpret him to have said. If you just take all the religious parts out of it. Right. But
Cameron,
everyone wants to elevate him to be special. Yeah.
Can you have you described energy on this podcast? Like the satisfaction of people looking for energy. What is that?
I don't think he has. That'd be a good refresher.
Yeah. That'd be good for people who are watching that don't understand what you're talking about.
What is energy?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you could look at it from the physical context of what is energy. Okay. So everyone would agree with, which is like if you have a battery, right? Like for example, you have a remote control car and you put batteries in it and you leave it on for 3 days. Eventually you turn it on, it doesn't work, right? Why? Because the battery ran out of energy, meaning it had so much buildup of polarity, right, over here, that what happened was it got discharged by electrons moving from one side to the other, and that created friction. That friction was turned into mechanical motion, which allowed the car to drive, right? Does that make sense? So what happens is eventually the battery runs out, because to create the battery, you had to take a bunch of resources and energy and put it into the battery to store it. Right. And then it discharges and allows something to happen. So what happens when the battery runs out of energy? It's out of energy.
Toss that motherfucker in the trash.
What happened to the energy? Does the energy exist somewhere?
been dissipated.
It dissipated into heat, into motion, and all types of other areas, but it's in a form now where you can't get it back easily.
Right.
Okay. So within ourselves, what are we doing? Like, we get up in the morning, we go to work, right? Why do we go to work? Well, because I love my kids. There's a feeling, right? Or I'm afraid of what's such and such happening, right? So there's a energetic movement inside of you that gets you to do something. Or you could say, no, I just do it because it makes sense to do it. That would be an example of doing something not based on energy.
And how would you describe that energetic movement inside of you? Because some people would describe it as a gut feeling or like an emotion or a thought that they have. What's the difference between experiencing energy or just like your body has something that's wrong with it, you know?
Say it one more time. I was texting on the chat window.
Okay. Like what would be the difference between somebody experiencing something in their body versus experiencing energy? Like there's something wrong with your body or you're getting an energetic experience within your body.
So when I talk about energy and I'm when we're talking about in the context of it seeming like maybe we're saying it's not the best thing, what we're talking about is when you do something to generate a feeling within yourself. For example, I buy my kid a toy because I want to see that look on their face when they're like, thank you, Dad, so much. I love you so much. And you're like, oh yeah, I'm such a good dad. Like that would be buying a kid. That would be you trying to create energy within yourself. And you could apply that to so many, like why, okay, here's an example. For those of you who have celebrated Christmas, I mean, you guys grew up Muslim, but you celebrated Christmas too. I mean,
yeah, we did.
Okay. So you know what that's like, right?
Yeah.
I think most people can relate to that, right? So why do people celebrate Christmas? Generally speaking.
Because of the joy.
Like it feels good, right?
Right.
You get all this feeling warm and feeling good and everyone's around. Of course, if you're really honest with yourself, it doesn't really feel as good in reality in real time when you're experiencing it as when you're imagining it. True. Like the
100%.
buildup of Christmas is generally way better than the actual thing itself.
Yeah.
Because what it is for most people, I'll just talk from my own experience, is a bunch of drunk uncles sitting around watching football or opening presents and being like, okay, but where's the next one? These are really great, but okay, what's next? It's like it's a discharge of energy where you like get this feeling and then it's over.
I remember.
You know what I mean?
I remember celebrating way back with my first girlfriend when I was in high school, celebrating Christmas with her. And the family time is great. It's fun. Everyone's eating, chatting, all this stuff. But when it gets to like Christmas, like gift opening time, it's like weirdly uncomfortable to like take a picture, read the card. Like it's like weird. It's like we're trying to do something that's not coming naturally.
But that's like the ritual point, right?
What do you mean? Well, yeah, perfect example.
That is
it's
the
the
ritual.
same thing. It's like, just do the ritual. So if I were to now question somebody and be like, dude, I'm not going to do Christmas with my kids. It's stupid. They'll just be like, what? You want to deprive them of the magic of Christmas? And
the pitter patter of their little feet coming down the stairs. They see the gifts under the tree.
I'm glad you said that. I enjoy the pitter patter of their feet coming on the stairs every single day.
Right.
Why? Because I don't have to go to a job and they don't have to go to school. Mm-hmm. And when they come down, I'm excited to see them. They're excited to see me. Sometimes
every day is Christmas.
Every day is Christmas. Like,
yeah, right.
You know, and another thing, going back to the buying toys thing, there was a part of my process that I had to walk through as a father where I just wanted to buy toys for the kids all the time. And my wife was like, hey, when you do that, they just want to ask for toys all the time. And I was like, oh, wow, yeah. So I had to challenge that point within myself.
Fuck.
You see what I mean? I had to challenge that point and realize like, oh, why was I doing it? Because I was excited for them. So I'm not just like hypothesizing. Like I know, I'm honest with myself. I know what people are going through.
Yeah.
Right. And to someone who might say like, well, you don't know what it's like to be Muslim. You don't know what it's like to be Buddhist. Sure, I do. I can put myself in their shoes based on the information that I have. Right. You can understand someone through their starting point and through what they say. And the reality is no one is different. Like there is not a fundamental difference between a Christian, a Muslim, or an atheist, or a Jew, or or did I say atheist? There's no difference again. Because here's how I know.
Yeah.
You have a child who grows up Muslim, right? From the time they're born. Let's just reverse time for a moment. Take that child right before they even meet their parents. They're adopted by a Christian family over here. What that child's going to be?
Christian.
Totally.
Obvious. Yeah.
What if they were raised by atheist parents?
They'd be atheists.
Now, is there a potential like they can start watching YouTube channel videos and start becoming Muslim or become Christian,
sure.
in the reverse of what, sure, that happens too. So, but my point is they're
like,
going to
infrequently relative to the,
but you know what I'm saying? You're not you're not born a Muslim. You're not born a Christian.
That's why you're born again Christian, right?
Yeah, you're born, have to be born again, right? But the real question is, can we be born again as actual real human beings who are not just needing some fucking programs and rituals to give us purpose, and actually look at things with common sense and be like, hey, what would actually be best if I were to remove all my biases and actually look at reality? Now, here's something I want to address too, because we kind of talked, I don't know if we talked about this last time, the whole racism thing, right? Can I remove the white skin that I have?
No.
Well, unless I go to Muslim hell, apparently, right? And they'll just keep putting it back, right? But what I'm saying is,
maybe you can swap it.
It'll be a lot darker though.
You know what's funny though? Yeah, it'll be
Try it
crispy.
out.
But you know what's funny though is when you're describing that Muslim hell that you were taught, I'm like, that's exactly what Christians are taught. I'm like, I'm surprised at how much similarity there is. I'm like, that's the same thing, just repeated into another cultural context. But what I'm saying is, okay, as a you know, I guess you could just say white as for lack of a better
White
term.
cisgender male.
A white, yeah, cisgender male. Right? But as a white person
Him.
and as a male, I have physical
What'd you say?
characteristics,
He,
right?
him. Yeah.
He, him, please, thank you. Right? like for example, like for those of you who can't see the video, we have Drake, who's black. We have Asif and Kian, who are how would you describe yourself?
We're brown.
Something in
Brown.
between.
Okay. Brown.
Yeah.
Mitch is
I'm-
white. Okay.
I'm brown. You guys are not white. You're peach and tan colored. You
Yeah, that's what I
say-
said.
we
I'm
didn't
not white.
say-
I'm peach
Oh.
and tan. But what I'm saying is like, okay, like we were talking about this the other day, Drake. Like you and I, because of our different genetic makeup, you have a different sort of like texture to your hair, right?
Yeah.
Than I do.
Yeah.
My hair is very thin and balding. Okay.
That's good.
Right. But my point
I'm
is
not
like,
too far behind.
maybe we need to use like a different type of shampoo or lotion or something like that based on our different genetic things, right?
I definitely need a higher grade barber than you need. Right.
Even though I do
In terms
go
of
to
literal
a
skill.
you
high
do
grade
go
barber,
to,
but
my
that's only a
barber.
recent development because I got tired of listening to women cut my hair.
Right.
So yes, I'll throw the sexism in as well. But my point is, no, like there were certain things that she didn't understand about cutting my hair, and it's funny because when I would go there, I would just keep going for a long time because I felt bad trying to go somewhere else. And Katie was like, "When she cuts your hair, you look like an old man." So then I go to a real barber, this Puerto Rican guy who was from New York, who then came to the U.S. based from Puerto Rico originally, and he asked me one day because I had to trim my beard too. He's like, "You want me to hook it up?" And I was like, "I think so." I'm like, you just mean like
That's
cut
why
it?
you look so
Like, what do you
fresh.
mean?
That's why you look so good that last time.
And he was like, "No, like hook it up, like get it all trimmed, like all the lines and everything." And I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, definitely." Yeah.
That's why you look so
And
good.
then
that
when I
time.
did that, the next day, everyone's like, "Whoa, you look
Yeah.
great! Like everything looks really good." And I'm like, "Oh, that's pretty cool, right?"
Yeah.
But my point is like, physically, genetically, we're different. We have differences in the way our body looks, operates, everything. There's a lot more similarity than there is difference, but there are actual differences that we need to take, into consideration. Like, if you have a boy versus a girl, like a girl and a boy are going to go through puberty differently. You need to understand that. You can't just be like, your daughter starts, menstruating. You can't just be like, sorry, you're a boy, stop doing that. Like, that's not how reality works.
Yeah.
Now, beyond that, to then say, well, because you're this skin color, you must think this way, you must believe these things. That doesn't make any sense. That is that's like a software that we've accepted, not a hardware issue. So what I think we should do is look at the hardware issues between human beings, make accommodations. Everybody should have the best for what they need based on their specific physical circumstances, not based on beliefs and preferences, right? Although if you have a preference, as long as it's not harming another person, there's nothing wrong with having a preference, right? So if I want to wear certain clothing, that's a different quote culture than white culture. Why is the problem with that? You see what I mean? So we can get into preferences, but then we can get into actual physical reality. Okay. But beliefs and religion are not physical reality. And in fact, as we've been discussing, what's the whole point of them? Is to talk about what's not physical, is to make excuses for the physical reality. So there's no way, if by holding on to those things, whether it's because of your skin color or just because you were brought up this way, or it's the country you were born in, or it's just fear, it's only going to limit us from talking about reality. And in words have been invented, like this word, Islamophobia, homophobia. I'm sure there's other ones too, right? But these are like the big buzzwords. So what is the word xenophobia. What does the word phobia mean?
Fear.
Like, I remember when I was a kid, they had this movie called Arachnophobia.
Ooh.
And it was about these giant fucking spiders that were like attacking everybody. So it was like the fear of spiders. You know what I mean? So are there people who fear other people because they are different? Absolutely. Right? But is it because they're different, or is it because that person for some reason fears losing something that they have? Is that fear justified? Well, probably to some degree, no, and to some degree, yes. But let me ask you a question. Would you guys rather be around somebody who's rich or someone who's just the same skin color as you?
I'd rather be around somebody who's rich.
Versus someone who's like extremely poor. You see what I'm saying? Like, in other words, if you were thinking about it as if you have somebody if you're somebody who has money, would you rather be around somebody who's poor and wants to take your money? Or are you more like, no, I only want people who are my skin color because then I can trust them? Why would you fucking trust some meth? Why would I trust some white dude meth guy in a trailer?
Dude.
Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, does that no one thinks like that.
Mm-mm.
So when I go to visit my family in the Dominican Republic, they're just like, they think, you know, anybody who's in America is royalty. They live like kings. They have all this money, all this, right? And so when I go visit them, they will literally look at the clothes that I'm wearing and go, wow, that's really nice. You know, I wish I had a shirt like that, you know, just basically implying, and I have to, well, I don't have to, but it feels really guilty to go, this is my shirt. I just bought this shirt for this trip. But at the same time, I recognize I just bought this shirt because I could. You can't even get this shirt.
Yeah.
So,
it really is a difference in reality.
Yeah.
So I guess the point I'm trying to get across with this little diatribe on race and religion and stuff is, let's look at the underlying issues that are causing the problems, you know? And so we can get focused on skin color. We can get focused on all these other things that in the current context of reality do make a difference. Meaning, I don't just mean physically, I mean mentally. Like, people see each other as different things and they will have assumptions and so forth. But if you really become honest about all of it, what it all comes down to is we live in a world where you have to compete to survive. So let's just imagine for a moment we took away all race out of the equation. Everybody became black. Okay. Wouldn't there still be competition for survival?
For sure.
I had a friend two white friends that I was talking with about these racism points, talking about people of color. So I had another white friend try to tell me how people of color feel when they drive their cars and go to the mailbox at night and all this stuff. But he made that point because we were talking about how slavery existed before, you know, the white people went over to Africa. It existed in Africa from their own people, right? Like Ethiopians to Ethiopians. And he's like, yeah, like he didn't say anything, but he was like, if everybody was white, there would still be slaves. And I was like, that's a great point. And I think one of the best premises that I did not accept, I didn't even understand at all when I first heard it. But over time, I'm like, oh shit. We've all heard it. Everything is in reverse. Mm-hmm. I had friends try to tell me, they said, race is the reason for the money and education disparity. I was like, dude, it's money and education. That's the root of the race suppression.
Yeah.
And in the same way that all of religion and spirituality is trying to get you to forget about the physical and go into some other dimension. But it's like, forget about the other dimensions. It's about coming back to the physical.
But look, I can understand the argument that, okay, let's just say you accept the premise that generally speaking, the white people in this world are more racist and oppressive of the black people because, and it's simply because they've had a different advantage. Okay. Mm-hmm. So therefore they're in that advantage and they can use that advantage to like continue their advantage. So let's just accept that premise for a moment. Then I can understand why someone would say, okay, like the white people, they see the black people as inferior because they look different and they act differently according to what their belief is. They have a different culture, whatever it is. And we want to keep our competitive advantage. So we're going to withhold resources. We're going to withhold education and so forth. And we're going to do that in a systematic way so that you'll never, ever get to a point of equality with us. So you never threaten us. You'll never challenge our status quo, our what we have and so forth. I understand that argument. And I'm not even suggesting that that doesn't exist. But the solution is to make sure everybody has an effective education, even the white people. Because even the white people don't have a real education. They would just, in this scenario, they just have a competitive advantage in a system based on competition. But that system, the starting point of it, the way it functions, there can only ever be a 1% that wins. So let me ask you, like, would it be better if we just had every race represented equally in the 1%?
No.
Like, that doesn't make sense. The
No.
solution, so the problem is if you continue to make it about race, do you really think that in the current system we have, all black people, and let's just include brown people as well, all of them can be millionaires?
No.
Do you see
Not
the
in the
problem?
current system,
You
yeah.
see, and it's not because of their race or their education, even if they were given the education, even if they were everything. That's not how the system is designed, right? It's a zero-sum game. Isn't that the right term?
Okay, so just to add to this, what would you say to the objection that, well, that's a much bigger problem to solve?
It's the reason why the other problems exist.
Right.
So you'll never be able to, like, in other words, let me put it this way. Let's say you took all the 1%, which I don't think they're all white anyways, but even if they were, take all of them out, replace them with all people of color, brown people, black people, whatever. Aren't there still going to be millions and millions and billions of people of color in poverty?
Yes.
You guys saw
Is the hope that then, because the evil people are out, the new people are in, that they're going to change the system? That's what revolution purports to believe, but never delivers on. It's just taking the haves, replacing them with the have-nots. The have-nots become a specialized class. And, you know, and someone brought this up, this really cool point. This might be challenging for some, but the concept of minority rights, right? And now it's a tricky trigger word, because if people says I'm against minority rights, that means you think that black people, brown people, et cetera, should be, you know, native people, whatever, should be oppressed. And that's not what that would mean. But if you think that the minority should be able to have a say over the majority, what the reality is it's an acceptance of reality as it currently exists, which is what's creating this problem for so many people on this planet. And the reality is most people on this planet are not white. So the people who are always going to be on the short end of the stick are going to be mostly not white, because that's the majority of people on the planet.
Yeah.
So even if you get rid of all the 11% of white people on the planet, you're still going to have a situation where the system itself hasn't changed. And it's going to create that 1% that doesn't distribute things effectively for everybody. And the only solution that people have, which is where the whole Marxism thing comes in and why so many people react to it, is just take everything and distribute it to everybody. But
that doesn't work either.
That is not. Why is it not going to work?
Because then you're just basically saying, first off, you're saying you don't have to take responsibility. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to improve or get better. But also it's taking from someone else and giving everybody whatever can be made from what's already there, as far as you're just distributing lack.
It's assuming things are limited. Exactly.
Yeah.
You're just distributing lack. That's all it is. So it's not raising everybody up. So what we're suggesting is, okay, what if we could take everybody, and it would take time to do this, but we could firstly create a new 1% based on principle, based on, I want to be in the new 1% to change the system, to do what's best for all. And that doesn't mean get rid of the current 1%. It just means become equal to where they're at. Okay, understanding how business works, and then understanding how government and politics. And we talked about some of this in the big picture. I think it was episode 3, I think, right? 2 or 3?
Yeah.
Right? One of those episodes we did. But then becoming the new 1% from the perspective of having direction and say over the system, and then utilizing democracy to support enough people to realize, like, hey, a better system is possible. But you can see how much education is going to be required to do that. So then we could, for example, change the education system, because that would be the biggest barrier, I think, to changing everything, especially in the United States, is the education system. Because how many people, regardless of race, come out of the education system actually being able to process information versus just memorizing something that allows them to take a certain special position in the system and either make money or not being able to do that, and then basically being screwed over. And can you guys see how, if you accept this concept of God as, I can't even do any of that stuff because there's a God, then all you can do is basically just complain and get mad and protest and all these things, but you're not able to actually find a real logical solution to the problem that's actually going to fundamentally change it. All it's going to do is end up just revolving back to the original point. And so if you place this higher intelligence as higher intelligence and we can't get to that, then what you're really saying is, I can't develop the intelligence required to understand the system, how it actually functions, and therefore find what the actual solution is and implement it so that everybody benefits.
You know,
that would be real equality.
What's interesting is, like, people are protesting and at the same time giving their consent for the system to remain the way that it is, to stay the same.
Explain, yeah.
So, okay, what you were just saying as far as people believing in God and just accepting that this is just the way that things are, and then but then they're going and complaining. Well, on the one hand, they're just accepting the starting point of, this is the way that things are, and this will have to continue, and this is life. And then on the other hand, they're complaining or protesting, or they don't like it, but yet they've already given their consent. They're already just accepting that this is how it's going to be, and it's going to continue this way, even though they don't like it. And so it's weird. It's I don't know how that could be described as far as on an individual level, like in an everyday experience, tripping over my own tongue.
You guys have seen all those pictures of people protesting, right?
Yeah.
So I want you to imagine each one of those people sitting down with a family and helping them build that child's vocabulary.
Wow.
To the level like we're doing with Max and Seneca.
Yeah.
Wow. Do you know what I mean? So by the time they're 3 years old, they can see that the masks, for example, don't make sense.
Yeah.
They can see that something like the concept of God doesn't make sense, not because of a reaction like, oh, these idiot religious theists. So, like, I'm beyond that. I'm an intellectual. I'm atheist. I know God doesn't exist. It's like, but you don't act like he doesn't exist. You act like everything's still just fine. And really, you still believe in God as the system. And you haven't questioned that God. You haven't questioned the starting point of God. You're still afraid of God. You're just trying to cover it up by saying you don't believe in it. Because if you really weren't afraid of questioning God, you would say, the thing that's supposed to take care of everybody, our economic political system, is enslaving us. It should be working for us, not the other way around. Like, why is it that we are the slaves to the economic system?
Yeah.
Why is it that we have the purpose of serving the system rather than the other way around? And no one wants to question that. And the idea of God, because it's not real, this is what you have to accept, it's not real, is just it's put into your mind so that you won't question the actual God that is the system itself that runs our world.
Yeah.
So it's all these little stories you're told, and then people try to fight over which one is the correct one. It was really obvious to me early on too, when I looked at the fact that there's so many different religions. And I was like, well, they can't all be right.
Right.
And they were obviously, some of them were so fundamentally close to each other. I was like, it just became obvious to me. I was like, well, obviously none of them are. The fact that there's more than one just shows you none of them are correct. So we're not suggesting a religion. We're saying free yourself through common sense, through an effective vocabulary, through forgiving yourself. What is the point of what's the point of religion at one level? And I think, as if you mentioned it, is that like this God, this force, whatever, is going to forgive you. You see what I mean? Like you mentioned this earlier, I think it was in reference to your uncle or something like that. It's like, this friend that you were talking to, if I do all these things, it's like I'm forgiven and all this. Mm-hmm. So what if we just said, look, we can just forgive ourselves. Like all the shit we've done in our past that we know wasn't best, that we did, we can just be honest with ourselves. We didn't know any better. We didn't have good examples. Let's forgive ourselves, change, do what's best. And then let's move on and take the power of God and create a world that's best for all. But we want to project that out and say, nope, there's a God out there. I can't prove it, but it's just out there. Isn't that just basically laziness?
It is laziness and it's ignorance, because before I met you guys, I had a hope that, yeah, I can become godlike and we can actually change this world and make it a better place. But I did not know what to do. I thought it was like, pray to the universe or something for like some insight into how to, make a bunch of money. Mm-hmm. And then from that money, somehow, theoretically, I would be able to do something with it that would improve people's lives. But now I see it so clearly that really to give as you want to receive means being smart enough to realize there's a system that governs the entire planet, which is money and law fused into one, in the whole political economic landscape. And that's the thing that is going to empower us and and will serve us so that we can give as we want to receive. But it requires us to realize that we need to actually become equal to it and work up into different positions in that system to then change it so it can be life-giving. So no amount of meditation or yoga is going to do that.
I just want to add to that, Mitch, because you stimulated this one point that I realized is like people either think things can't change and can never be best, or they want to pretend like they already are, despite the evidence. Like, everything's just great. I just have to imagine it and allow it to come in. But what you were just saying is we have to create it. So there's like 2 points here. There's heaven on earth is possible. Everybody having everything they need, the best world is possible. It's not possible tomorrow. I mean, theoretically, yeah. If everybody just stopped and dropped their bullshit and was able to just stop being self-interested and realize like we should create a system, very quickly we could change things. But we know that's not practically possible because it takes time to change it. You have to make mistakes. You think you're improving and you realize, oh, my starting point was fucked. I don't really want to change. I don't actually want to do what's best. It's hard. It sucks. I don't want to give up my addictions and all these things, right? And so there's a process where it's like those of us who see this point have to walk this process of getting to that point where we can remove enough ego, where we can be in a position where then we'll trust ourselves. When you have your hand on the button that says, give everybody enough, or fuck them, I'm in a position of power, I'm going to do whatever I want now. It's like, you'll push the right button. You know what I mean? And that button is metaphorical for whatever particular point you're going to play. When you have all the money coming in because you've built something within the starting point of, I'm going to do what's best. Am I going to be willing to give it up when it's time?
Yeah. You were talking, you mentioned that when we were, the behind closed doors chats that we were talking about, of when we're in those positions, that we know that we can absolutely trust ourselves because there will come a point in time where we will have to give it all up.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, yeah, because our purpose isn't to have those things.
Yeah.
One of the things I just wanted to nail on that I wanted to mention when I was talking about like the race and money disparity and things like that was, you guys saw that. I don't know if we talked about it on the podcast, but with apartheid in South Africa and how Guion had that post about as he was rising up and talking to the higher level society members in South Africa, how it became clear to him there was blacks, whites at the top, whatever, race didn't matter. And they were saying and showing, I believe, that they don't care what race is poor. They just need poor people so that they can implement government or programs.
And when they're working with each other, they don't have a problem with each other being black and white.
Exactly, yeah. Like it doesn't matter.
It's really not about race, but they use the idea of a racial division to fuel unrest and keep people in poverty and so forth.
Exactly. And so it was just a cool point because he was just the fact that he was willing to share that is like the truth of the matter is they keep a certain percentage of people poor, and then they implement programs for those people. And once those programs are implemented, that millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars are going into it. There's a small group of people, black and white, that get a fat piece off of that.
Okay. Is that not exactly what we're seeing in the United States right now? We've had policies that are, let's call them racist policies, that have kept black people very poor when they could have just been just like everybody else. Let's say. But because of government policies and so forth, they've been kept poor. Because of shitty school systems, they've been kept uneducated. And now they're pissed. Rightfully so. But what is the solution? Because if anyone thinks the solution is just get all the white people to stop being racist, that wasn't the problem that created, like, in other words, isn't it interesting that there could be something as structural racism without a lot of white people being racist? Because if a lot of white people were racist, how come Obama got like this huge percentage of like the white vote?
Yeah.
Like, why would they? You don't have to tell anybody who you voted for. You could have just not voted for him. You see what I mean? But it shows that that's not the case. But that doesn't mean that there are policies that have been put into place that have disadvantaged people. The problem is trying to say, just like Drake pointed out, trying to say, okay, well, let's take a part of this, quote, limited pie and divvy it up amongst everybody. That's still accepting things the way they are. It's like, well, more Black people should go to Harvard. Dude, Harvard is a fucking, like, just elite club where you don't really learn anything. You just network and you become part of the elite that controls everybody else. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not actually prestigious. You don't actually learn anything at Harvard. You're just able to get the better job. But let me ask you a question. If every Black, brown, indigenous, every race person was able to go to Harvard, would Harvard have the same meaning anymore?
Not at all.
And it's not because the Black people are going there, but why would it not have the same meaning?
Because you're not networking with the elite. It's a school for the elite. And so,
well, true, but I guess I was just trying to get at, it wouldn't be special anymore. Like, think about it. Okay.
You mean if it was like kind of forced like that? Like,
no, not even if it was forced. Like just like if genuinely all the Black people and brown people were able to go to Harvard, and they were even able to qualify to get in, and all of them went to Harvard, which is like millions and millions and millions and millions of people.
Oh, okay.
Then when you go to a job interview, if you're like, I went to Harvard, what would they say?
So does everybody else.
Yeah, everybody went to
Harvard.
Harvard.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is the idea, like the solutions that are being put forth are not questioning things like that of like, why should it fucking matter where you went to college?
True.
You know, like, why should that name mean anything? Why should jobs be based on competition rather than like everybody is qualified to do it? And therefore, since everyone's qualified, there's no, how do we even compete for jobs? Well, we should just give everybody enough money so you don't have to have a job. And only people who want to work should. And everything is so efficient because everyone's so educated that you don't need a lot of people to work. You know what I mean? Only a few, and there's enough people who want to, because they would be like, well, I want to be a part of contributing to that they would. And I know the argument everyone says, well, if no one worked, then who would make your McDonald's? I don't fucking need a McDonald's. Do you know what I mean? Like, okay, there's no McDonald's. If they had money, they don't need to work there anyways.
Yeah.
Who's going to take out the trash baskets? You know, like, I guess I'll have to do it then. You know what I mean? So what? So we'll justify like this real actual economic slavery just because we don't think things can change. But do you guys see where I'm coming from? Meaning like the solutions that are being put forward right now are not real solutions. It's really just revenge.
One of the realizations that I had real quick was like that point of, we all heard that interview, or someone talk about that interview of how they interviewed somebody from Harvard, and they're like, do they really get a different education? They're like, no. Like, they learn all the same stuff. It's just that your bunkmate might be Al Gore, or like the people at your network work. Right. It just clicked for me when it's like, why does it matter that you went to Harvard? If somebody values that on a resume, you know, if I saw that on a resume before this, I'd be like, oh my gosh. But it just means that your family's already rich. Like that, you know, like, I just like you more.
Somehow you got in there. You must be special.
Exactly. But it's not because you're more
if everybody can do
educated.
it, right. If everybody can do it, it loses its specialness, which is why I'm saying
specialness.
That's why I'm saying if everybody in the world were Black, there would still be inequality, because the solutions that are being put forward to equalize things racially in the United States are not questioning the system itself. And there are some who are starting to question things, but they're kind of coming in from like the Marxism side, which just means tear everything down and redistribute it, which is still accepting this fundamental point that we're born into lack, which is like we're born into sin. Like, we have to just basically, if I'm going to have to live in a shitty life, everyone has to live a shitty life. And we're saying the exact opposite. Everybody should be moving towards self-perfection, realizing also, though, that it's going to require those who are in a position who, for lack of a better word, are privileged to be able to do it. So with your privilege comes responsibility. But what do I see happening a lot? I have this privilege, therefore I'm going to step out of my position and let somebody else step in. So then what do you do? What do your kids do? Why don't you just take your position of responsibility and promote what is best for all and move up? Because that is going to long-term create a situation where everybody has what they need, right? And that's really, I think, what we're calling for, is for everyone to consider, instead of projecting outward that there's this God that's going to fix everything, that's going to punish the wicked and reward the poor, we have to implement that system. That would be the God system of equality that allows everybody to give as they want to receive. So you don't have to give the dollar to the homeless person. There's already a system that's giving the dollars to people so they're not homeless in the first place. This doesn't require you to physically do much. Just giving your acceptance to that system. And that's what voting and democracy is supposed to be about. But that, like, think about it. As a voter, can I ever change the system of government? Think about it.
Just as a voter, no. You'd have to be willing to be on that ballot and have a network of people.
Or there has to be somebody there. So I'm not saying, every voter has to become a politician, but I'm not talking really to those people. I mean, I am, because only a certain number of people need to step up. But really what we're looking for is those ones who want to be in those positions. But even if you're like, look, that's not my role and my path in this life, then become the voter who's waiting for that person and supporting them and giving your fundraising dollars and promoting their videos and promoting this podcast and things like that. Then you can be a part that way. Walk the process of self-perfection. When it comes down to it, you're not going to react emotionally when, I'm running for office and they replayed this podcast and take out a one part and edit it and say, like, Cameron's a racist and he hates Muslim people or whatever. They're going to say, they're going to do that. Yeah. But you have to be able to not react and process the information and go, okay, no, hold on. There was a context to what was being said. And actually what this person is saying is they want a world that's best for all. So how is that racist? Even though someone said it was. And so if you can't remove those emotional charges from yourself, then you're screwed. And if I can't remove the emotional charges of being called xenophobic and racist and all this stuff, I'm never going to stand up and speak up for what's best. Yeah. And what does that imply though? I just care what other people think. I don't really want to do what's best. And I'm just doing this podcast to get a nice, good charge off of everything and feel really cool and feel famous and have all these followers and all this stuff. Who cares? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, go ahead, Asif. Yeah.
I wanted to circle back around, unless anybody wanted to jump on those specific points.
Just that doing this podcast in itself is really the test of self-perfection, at least for me, because you can't fake this.
Yeah.
Everything will be exposed. And that's why I love it, because that's how it's legit. It's not this public face you can just put on and, oh yeah, I'm all about self-perfection. But then down the road, I'm like, oh, well, actually it got uncomfortable and inconvenient. It's like, you'll see it. You'll see it over the years, what this grows into.
When we mentioned talking about God for this podcast, I was like, oh, snap. And then the fear came up of like, oh, snap. My family's going to listen to us, all this stuff. But we live by principle. If I fear it,
let's do it.
But maybe people need to hear it too. And actually, it's funny you said
100%.
that. Yeah, it's funny you said that because I knew there's gonna be some reaction when I suggested it. But I'm like, I
Yeah,
know you
same
guys
here.
will go, well, if I have some fear, I gotta. It actually shows you that's the point that we should talk about, because then we're not just bullshitting people.
Yeah.
And there's also within self-perfection, it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to say something totally that's stupid and doesn't make sense, and then someone points it out to you or you see it for yourself.
You have to say it in order for somebody to point it out and be like, yo, you're stupid because of this.
Right.
Rather than reacting, just be like, oh, okay, I see that.
But how many people are just afraid of making mistakes and won't ever do anything?
Yeah.
And you learn that in school, you learn it from your parents. What were you saying, Jake?
I remember, I think it was about a year ago. It might have been 2 years ago now, but about a year ago or a little bit longer. I remember just being deadly afraid of making mistakes. I didn't want to look like, and I remember messaging you about this, about looking like a fool or looking stupid or looking dumb. And it's funny because it's common knowledge, I guess, so to speak, but everyone knows, or they should know, that you have to go through a point of looking like you don't know anything before you get to the point where you know shit. Where you have mastery.
Most people call that failing.
Right.
But what is failure actually in this context?
Learning.
Actually progress. Yeah. It's
But let me rephrase my question.
Okay.
What would be an actual real failure?
Quitting.
Oh,
Yeah.
Quitting.
Stopping.
Giving
Just
up.
giving in.
yeah, exactly.
So what most people think of as failure is like, you didn't get it right. Try it again.
Right.
Like just do it again. And that's when you really learn. Like being in sales and so forth, whenever everything just went bam, 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 bam. Yeah, cool. I got the result. Awesome. But I didn't really grow from it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's okay. I'm not complaining. Like, cool, I made the money, go, whatever. But it was the ones where you really fuck up big time.
Yeah.
You know, maybe you guys can, I know, Mitch, I think you have to go shortly, but we have a few minutes left. Maybe I'll start with you. From your perspective, that point, because I know that was another thing you brought up wanting to maybe touch on, was this point about failure being a gift. And, you know, because if we look at it, our system from a certain perspective is doing everything it's supposed to do. It's not broken. It's operating the way it's supposed to do, but it is still failing everybody because it's not valuing life above profit. But from your perspective, Mitch, like what's your take on failure and how that's played a role in your life and just what you see moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty hardwired into a lot of us, at least. I mean, I grew up in America where it's like, don't fail, or you get a participation trophy even if you do suck. And it's just all this excess bullshit basically around this idea of failure, instead of just seeing failure for what it is. You got a result. It wasn't the result you necessarily wanted or intended, but it happened for some reason. And so recently I've been really living on the understanding that the people who are the most successful just fail the most, or they get really good at failing and they don't take it personally, or it doesn't degrade their self-esteem or their self-worth. Rather, it's just like, I'm just throwing myself into this. You know, I'm not just doing random shit, wasting my time. Like, I'm applying myself in something that I know works. I've seen it work with other people. I just need to perfect myself within it.
Yeah.
And then there's this one other phrase that has really opened my eyes, and I love this phrase, and I want to do a podcast specifically on this at some point, but this concept of anti-fragile, where you learn that from each failure, you actually get stronger from each of them. Not like, oh, I failed and quick, get it over with. I just want to feel good again. But like, no, this is right where I messed up. Okay, and then here I could have done that too. Okay, now how do I correct myself? You know, do self-forgiveness, do some TT on it, things like that. Where then the next time you actually prove to yourself you can do it. Because then I'm actually better off because I failed. And now I'm even more robust and stronger. So that's my take on failure. And it's probably only been the past 6 months that I've really come to embrace that. Now I look forward to failing, even though it sucks sometimes, of like feeling like, oh, it could have gone this way or that way. But even that is, I notice even more in real time, I'm just able to be stable through that failure, learn the lessons, and then, you know that I'm becoming stronger from it.
I just put a little link real quick in the chat window for you guys for later, but I wanted to point it out because in that blog, it's from Bernard's blog, the first three sentences in there says, failure is positive feedback. Success is negative feedback. This is life enlightenment. Right. So for anybody who's like, what? Go check out creationsjourneytolife.blogspot.com. And if you go to the timeline, it's day 247. Of course, you're probably going to need to go back to the very beginning and read them from the beginning, but it's still, it's cool to, take ones and read ones that are interesting to you. But the best way to do it is start from the beginning. But that one is really cool. It says, without failure, self-perfection is impossible. Without failure, birthing harmony on earth is impossible. And I'll just finish this. Without failure, perfecting individualization is impossible. Without failure, enlightenment, perfection is impossible. What do you want to say, Jake?
No, that ties in perfectly with what I want to say, because, what Mitch had just shared and what you were talking about as far as the necessity of failure. I was actually having a conversation with Katie this morning because we were talking about biscuits and baking and, all those things. And, I love to bake, but I just had a realization this morning that the failure of baking is actually my favorite part. It's the part where you're breaking down everything that you did and, okay, this didn't work. Why didn't this turn out the way that I wanted it to? Was it this part over here? Or maybe if I tweak this over here, I'm going to try this and see. But what I noticed is, because, for instance, I'll bake something and get it so good the first time, and then I want to show it off. And I'm like, yes, I'm going to make this for so-and-so over here or so-and-so over there. Or maybe not the first time, but there'll be a point early on where I'll get it really good, where I really like it. And then I'll go and try to replicate that. And I'll go, wait, what happened? Something went wrong here. And I thought I did everything. There's something I did differently and I'm not sure what. And I have to look and really examine and know each and every component. It forces you to learn more and more and more about whatever it is that you're focused on. And then that is the process of self-perfection, because then you get to a point where you're keeping track of every single piece that you weren't even aware of beforehand. And when you're keeping track of it, then you can replicate each and every single piece the next time and get it so that you're making the same product over and over and over and over again, getting the same result, or getting the result that you're actually seeking. That's what I wanted to share on that. Yeah.
I want to add real quick. It says in this thing, failure when grasped is the map and the road to self-perfection.
Makes sense.
And it says failure is the state in which all beings exist, when the relationship between beings do not produce a reality that is best for all life. It says failure brings awareness. Success brings blindness and ignorance. Failure produces the ultimate understanding. Success is when nothing is learned from failure. And what I want to add to that is, think about the person who's living their life right now and is making money, they're successful, nothing seems to be going wrong in their reality. You've seen these people. That's the elite. They don't have any reason to change anything. So if we're just protesting, why the fuck would they listen? They're creating all of this deliberately. And what's really unfortunate is there's a lot of these movements that are created by the elite to channel all of the frustration that they know is there into a way that will not change the system.
Wow.
So why are all of us here? And we talked about this in our first podcast. It's because at some level our lives didn't work and we knew it. And instead of trying to cover it up with more success and positivity, we were like, wait a second, fuck that. Like, what's the actual problem here? And we were willing to be honest enough to keep going and going and going and being like, oh, there's a problem in reality. It's like we actually saw there's like a crack in the foundation. Like that's going to get really big. I'm really glad I took the time to stop and look and see that. And now we have to get everyone else to look at it, because that crack exists in everyone's foundation. It's not just in one of us. It's not just in the system. The system's a reflection of us, right? I know, Mitch, I think you have to go, right?
Yeah, I got to hop off, but
okay. You guys want to add anything in closing, or?
I'll jump off. You guys.
Okay. Okay. We'll see you next time.
See you, Mitch.
Go ahead, Asif.
Kian, you're muted.
Is Kian talking? Oh, yeah.
He's like, bye, Mitch.
Yeah, I was trying to say goodbye to Mitch, but Mitchy boy's gone.
Go ahead, Asif.
So what I wanted to circle back around to was what I've come to understand God as. But before that, I think the way in which we describe how we are slaves to God, right? What Kian was talking about. So it's either, we're God's slaves, or we're slaves to God, or we're here to serve God. We should just look at the things that we're actually slaves to.
Yeah.
To find out what we value as God, which is what you're talking about earlier, of the system that provides everything for us.
Asif, is it even a controversial statement to say that we're slaves to God?
No.
Meaning, isn't that what religious people openly say?
Yeah. Like, I'm here to serve God.
He's our Lord. He's our master. We're there to say, okay, I just want to throw that in there for anybody who's like, how are we slaves to God? I'm like, hold on, just ask anybody. They'll tell you.
Yeah. This is not me saying this.
Yeah, okay.
It's written in the Quran. It's a good
it's
point.
there, yeah.
It's a good point, yeah. And so it's like, what we're really enslaved to is money and our feelings. Mm-hmm. As in, Jesus was willing to, like, okay, imagine if I was like, if we were roommates and I was like trying to wake up for like a job interview and like whatever, I was like still sleeping. You heard my alarm going off and you were up and you knew I was kind of like fucking throwing my life away and all that stuff. And you're like, man, this guy needs to go to the job interview. But you're like, but I want to be nice and gentle. And you're like, hey, Asif, like wake up. And I'm like,
hurt your feelings,
dude. Yeah, whatever. But what I would really want is for you to get me to that fucking job interview, because it's the best thing for my life. I want you to get a bucket of water and throw it on my face, and I'll be like, dude, what the fuck, man? Like, but it would be the best thing for me. Yeah. And that's the kind of shit that, for example, Jesus was willing to do, and I believe Muhammad for Islam was willing to do. As like, he'd go in, like, the way people, and this is what I got from it, what I realized I was imprinted in before I read that story in the Bible. of when Jesus went in and he flipped the tables. Did he go in and just like overturn the tables and was like, guys, stop it, get out? Like, have you, any of you ever flipped a table other than just to work on the table? Like, have you ever flipped a table in your life?
Hold on, let me try it right now. No. It's probably not easy.
It's like, think about who you would have to be if you went into some place, saw a bunch of stuff that you didn't agree with, and you started flipping tables.
Right.
Like, this
I
guy was
imagine
probably
like
like, oh, like, how
I imagine
dare
like
you?
a mafia guy like running, like coming in somewhere and be like, what the fuck's going on? And like
Yeah,
flipping
just
everything,
flipping
you know?
tables,
Like,
right?
yeah.
But, and
like
so
alpha.
the
Be
reason,
enraged.
be enraged,
exactly.
right? So
Yeah.
that's what Jesus was willing to be. He wasn't like, oh, no, I gotta be divine. I gotta be enlightened. I gotta be. He wasn't just searching for that thing of like, let me.
But
come
all the
in
pictures you see of
and
him
share.
try to paint him like he's this really docile, effeminate, sort of just like, you know, nice, gentle guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like
Shoulders
he's
of
like on the
wisdom.
cross, like,
Uh,
I would have been like, get me the fuck off of here.
yeah, like flipping a table. Yeah. And so the point is, what he was willing to not enslave himself of is like, you know, it's like he was born without a mind. He's born without that thing that was like, I have to do whatever my mind says. I have to do whatever my thoughts say because that's who I am. I have to do whatever my feelings say because that is who I am. And if you remove that, I'm not human because emotions are what make me human and all of that stuff. It's like he put all that aside and he was like, I just got to do what I see is like what these people need.
Yeah.
You know? And so going back to what I understand God as, what word is God most commonly associated with?
Dog.
As in, like,
Or love.
there's people, love, right?
Yeah.
And the other one would be what
Spirituality.
people, the two lines of thinking of how we came about is evolution and
Creation.
creation.
Yeah.
It's like being a creator.
Yeah.
Where we're passing all of who we are and what we've become as it's somebody else's fault why I'm like this. It's something outside of myself. But what it means to actually be God. Because everybody's saying, you know, I was abused, it was my parents' fault, all this stuff that created these emotions inside of me that make me afraid of talking to people. That create these emotions inside of me that I don't want to do this. I don't. To be God is to be a creator. And to create yourself, as Jesus would always talk about the living flesh and all that stuff, right? We should hit on all the points about how it talks about the word and all that.
Well, here, I'll give it to you, right? So,
Yeah.
because this is the point, to create. So if we want to create a new system, how are we going to do that? By writing new laws. How do we get into those positions? By becoming politicians, through speaking, right? And if you look at it, how did Jesus and his disciples create an entire religion? It's through talking.
Yeah.
Right? In any religion, right? Through talking, putting things in word format. In fact, I know, knowing Muslim people who are, you know, very heavily into their religion, they tell me that their whole deal is that the Quran is the unadulterated word of, you know, Muhammad. Like it hasn't been translated.
Of God.
I'm sorry, whatever. But you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like it's
from God.
it didn't get changed, edited, translated. It's in the original language is my point. Right? I know they say it's from God. But if you look at it just from the Christian perspective, if you are looking for yourself as a Christian person of how you can look at these points, in the beginning of the first the Gospel of John, right? It says in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And the meaning of that, we translate it as word. It can also be translated as like order or logic. There's different ways of looking at it, right? But it is words that order things. That's how you give orders. It's how you provide structure to our society. It's how you know, if you have a marriage, you have a contract. If you have a business, you have contracts. You have sales agreements. It's all in words, and it's through your words. I think people will get more pissed about what you say about them than what you do in many cases.
100%.
Like there's words that can trigger you depending on what race you are.
Yeah.
To flip out.
Yeah.
You know, but that would imply that word inside of you is like controlling you like a robot to get you to be crazy.
Yeah.
Right. In the beginning of the Bible, it says that in the beginning, God created the world, right? And he said, let there be light, for example. Right?
Why
So
didn't he
they're
like
speaking?
Why wasn't it like God used his hands and like waved them around, and that's what created light?
Right.
Like I remember reading that and seeing it's in quotes. Like
This is assuming that the Bible is trying to tell you there is a God that exists that actually created the universe. When it could be very likely that it's simply saying that this is how gods create. You see the difference? It could be like it's an operating manual for how to create a universe, right? You can create a universe in yourself. You can create a universe in the world. You can create a business. You can create any universe that you want where you make the rules and everything happens, right? And I know I think it's in Proverbs, it says that God is the Alpha and the Omega. And I always like bringing that one up with people because I'll say, so you've heard that? And they're like, yeah, I remember hearing that. And I say, well, okay, what is Alpha? What is Omega?
it's
What
the
is that? Or
beginning
no, I
and
say,
the
what does
end.
it mean? Yeah, and they say it's the beginning
The
and the end.
beginning,
Beginning
say,
and the end of what?
Of what? Right? And usually people say, oh, of like the universe. So in other words, like it's like you were saying earlier when you're talking to your friend and they're just kind of coming up with stuff. There's a certain point, it's like they heard something and now they're just trying to rationalize, like, well, maybe it's this. But I always point out, like, alpha is the first letter of the Greek alphabet and omega is the last letter. So if you just take it like in a literal sense, it's saying that God, which the creative ability of God is words, is speaking, right, is the alphabet itself. And your ability to master information and to speak and communicate will allow you to create this world. And you can either create it in the image and likeness of self-interest, or you can create it in the image and likeness of what's best. But it's going to be based on how you use words, how you understand things, how you interpret them. Like if somebody says, we're going to create a world that's best for all, and you immediately say, oh, that's not possible. It's like, how are the words structured within you and the definitions and the relationships in a way where you can't see it's possible? Because I can see it's possible. But I've also walked through a very specific process of questioning and re-examining and redefining all of these things using all of the tools that we talk about and on the website and so forth. So on my own, it wasn't going to just be obvious to me either. So on the one hand, I've done a process. On the other hand, this other person hasn't. They're just accepting what they're told. And so I wouldn't suggest that you take anything I say or Drake or Asif or Ken or Mitch or anybody says and just, well, there it is. You should ask questions. And I remember that was, you know, all of you did this, but Mitch rather was really specific about, I worked with you a lot too, individually, Drake, like in the beginning when we started talking and stuff. So you did this a lot too, but it was just so rapid with Mitch.
Yeah.
Right. Where he was like asking me a question and I was like, oh man, like, here we go. Right. And I would talk to him for an hour. And then next time I would talk to him, I'm like, wow, he totally took that and went with it. Like he didn't allow the cognitive dissonance even for a second, you know? It was like, what's the actual bottom line here? Like, explain it to me, you know, rather than, okay, but, you know, which a lot of people will do is like, they try to like argue with you instead of just listening.
Right, Ken?
Right? But that's also a difference in vocabulary. And Mitch really went to town using his techno tutor, even probably before we talked to him. What were you going to say about Ken?
So ham.
Yeah.
Me and Ken were talking about that point about when you're sharing these points, and you'll show them why reality is subjective, because they'll be like, but reality is subjective, and then you show them why it's subjective, and they're like, oh, okay, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
And then like 5 minutes later, but they'll be like, but you're trying to act like everything is like objective.
What I have to do,
we already established. Hold on, wait.
Like, listen to what Ken did.
I took this guy and I was like, look, man, I know when I answer this question, you're going to say the opposite the next sentence you say of what you just told me. He goes, okay, yeah, you're right. And we realized it in that moment.
Yeah.
Right? So then I go, okay, get a pen and paper. He's like, okay. I'm like, write down what I say this time. Because then that was the only way to take him through a train of thought. Because otherwise he would just keep looping back.
His mind jumps around too fast. Yeah.
Every time. Exactly.
And so,
yeah,
was there more to it?
That's for me. I think that was for me.
basically just getting him to write down that point because it was like so jumbled. But versus Mitch,
but it shows like how the mind, it just jumps, and then you don't even remember what you just thought 5 seconds ago, right? But you were gonna say about Mitch.
And then Mitch, he what you just said of like he participated. He's like he'd have the cognitive dissonance, and then he'd be like just work through it, and then he's on to the next question. But he was using his techno tutor like 4 hours a day, every day. That's the most I've seen consistently.
Which also shows his level of commitment, because then you have people who come into like looking at what we're talking about, and they're just trying to project their own ideas onto it rather than, and try to fit it into their vocabulary, which is why I'm sort of reticent to a certain degree to even like bring up the analogies about, you know, Jesus and words and stuff like that, because I wouldn't want someone to say, oh, how can I fit this into my Christianity? It's like, I would rather have, you know what I mean? I'd rather a person say, okay, why am I a Christian? It's because I just accepted everything I was told and I have some emotional reason for this. Okay, but that doesn't mean I have to just reject everything. Let me actually look at the parts of Christianity that makes sense. Does it make sense that Jesus is a supernatural being that's going to wipe away all of our sins? Well, show me the mechanics behind it. You know what I mean? Like, how does that actually work? Because if the world still is fucked for everybody and there's still protests and riots and lockdowns and all this shit, where's the actual evidence that our sins were wiped away? Well, it just means that I get to get into heaven when I die. Okay, well, you know what? I'm not interested in you then. I don't, you know, like, I'm here to change myself here in this world and change this world with other people who want to be here in this world. So if you just want to, I mean, if it's just like fantasy football, you're just playing, like, okay, go play, that's fine. But can you also be here and take care of real reality? Like, don't use fantasy to influence physical reality here. And that's the real problem that I would have with whether you're theist, atheist, or anything. It's not that you have a religion that I have an issue with, not at all. It's that it would have an effect in physical reality while you at the same time deny physical reality as having any importance or anything. And it's because, you know what? My children live here too, not just me, but also me, you know? Well,
real quick is, I noticed you were a little bit reluctant to like correlate, to line up those points of like what Jesus is saying, and because people will just take it as
it's one thing if you're talking to somebody and you're selling them, you know, but it's a different thing if you're really trying to get people to really consider the common sense, right?
But to really just, I'll do it one more time just to accent what you were just saying, of really bringing it all back and then really asking why and going deeper into it and being like, okay, why did I accept all this? Let me start like figuring it out. That's what Jesus meant as become like a child again. Of like, put yourself back in that state where you're not like, oh, your child isn't like when they're 3, they're not like, oh, I know everything. Like, don't, like, you're like, oh, like you could do this. They're not like, no, you can't do that. That's not possible. They're like, oh, how? Why?
Right.
That's what it means to become like a child.
And then you explain it and they're like, okay, but how was that? Or why? So the innocence is in not having a pre-biased, you know, assumption about the answer of what you want it to be.
Not trying to fit it into something already.
And so you see the breakdown of innocence in the children when they start to try to push it to be something they want. When they try to distort reality to what they want it to be because they want something, you know, and that's because they have some emotional need or fear or whatever it is, you know, and that's really what I think the biggest challenge as a parent is to not allow your child to lose that innocence. Innocence doesn't mean being cute. You know what I mean? You don't have to be cute to be innocent. Like
Cameron's cute, but he's not innocent.
I'm real cute. I'm really cute. But the innocence point is like you're not afraid. You're not afraid of what the answer is going to be. You just want to know the truth. So you can't be held accountable, like, meaning you're not the one that's to blame anymore. You see what I mean? You're not the one causing the fucking problem because you're like, no, okay, I see reality. I'm willing to work with that. So now you're innocent in that. I'm just talking about one dimension of looking at that, you know? And the reality is you can become innocent again. All it requires is you have to forgive yourself. Because if you're waiting for someone else to forgive you, and I mean, look at it. If everyone's already forgiven, then why complain about anything ever again? You know, if God is making everything okay and it's all taken care of, then just literally never complain about anything ever again in your life, not even the slightest little thing. What's the point? Because you just failed the test. You didn't have faith in God. Like, really put it to the test. And if you really have faith, give up all your possessions. Don't use money. You know what I mean? Like, don't do anything of this world and just see how that works out. But everyone will go, oh, I mean, you got to eat, you know, I mean, come on, it's physical reality. I'm like, oh, wait, I thought you could just have faith, or you could just, it's subjective or whatever. It's like, well, I mean, you got to be realistic. It's like, yeah, exactly. So where do you want to be realistic? Where's the limit to your realism, to your rationality? So where you're like, okay, I'll be realistic here. But then if I have to like do something different to accommodate for other people, and I'm like, you mean like give as you want to receive? Well, I mean, you know, giving as you want to receive just means I accept Lord Jesus as my savior, or I accept this book, the Quran, or I'm a Buddhist or whatever. It's like, no, it's actually in real physical reality measurable. whether everyone is having what they need or not. And I think that's the real test. So I know it's so funny because we can get into this whole, people might think you're just bashing religion or you're trying to take away people's right to religious freedom or something like that. But you don't even have the right to your own religious freedom if you can't question it in your own mind. You're not freely choosing it. Wow. You're just accepting. And then what happens is the people who go join another religion later in life, it's because of some trauma that they couldn't face, that they got all energized by this. It's the same reason people have a midlife crisis, divorce their husband or wife, and then go sleep with somebody else. Because they weren't getting any energy from this. So they're like, I just need to go fuck somebody else and get some energy that way. Yeah. People do it in all kinds of ways. Some people have children for that purpose. Like their energy's going out, they have kids. So it like brings new life to their marriage and all this shit, which is totally abusive. Yeah. You know, you should have kids from the starting point of, I want to support them to be self-perfected, you know, to be the best.
It's funny. In one of the blogs I read recently, they were talking about
which blog?
Creation's journey to life. And it was Bernard talking about how the stages of ascension, right? Where first God is your parents, and then you have religion, and you stop listening to your parents as much, or they're not so much the authority, it's the religion or the God in your religion. And then at some point, many people move on from religion and they go into spirituality, and they're God now, or, you know, it's the universe is God. Or
exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I did.
And no, I've done the same thing. I did the same thing. And then they go into their minds, and he was saying, you know, everyone's trying to escape this reality, escape their responsibility within all of it. Because, you know, even from the starting point of your parents are the authority and their God, it's their responsibility to take care of things. And at a certain point in the beginning, it is their responsibility to take care of you. Right. But
there should have been a system to support them with that, but which is another point. But
yeah. And they should also be supporting each child to then take responsibility for their own lives and take responsibility for the world around them, you know? And that would be a real change in the system. I think you were getting at this earlier. I think we probably said it in enough different ways, but God is really the system, or money, or the money system, or just...
It's the thing that actually determines the quality of your life.
Right.
What you have access to, what you don't. Which is, if you're self-honest, it's money. It's not anything else.
Right.
It's not your faith.
And I remember the first time that I saw you post that on Facebook, and I reacted so hard. I was like, oh my God. Can't believe he's saying this. Oh, I'm going to go to hell just for knowing this guy. That's honestly how it was. I was scared. I was triggered.
Did I deliver? I mean, you're in hell now, aren't you? So.
Oh yeah. I'm in it all the way. No, but
isn't it funny though? Like by you giving up all those points, your life has gotten better measurably.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And
which means, so we're not saying you have to start sacrificing it yourself to like save the world. That's also dumb.
Yeah.
Like you're not going to be able to make a difference in this world if your life is going to shit, because no one's going to listen to you anyways.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Drake, like you said, man, the system, like it's literally what is going to save us, quote unquote. It's what can forgive you for anything.
Right.
If you break a law and you pay enough money, you're good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, in the Lord's Prayer, they say, forgive us our debts. Sometimes they say trespasses, but sometimes they say debts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And also, like, part of the church really early on was you could just pay for your to absolve your sins. Right? You just go.
Wow. So the rich people are good.
Yo, do you guys want to make a church?
Yeah. We'll just forgive everyone.
Well, that's really what self-perfected really is. It's a new church.
Yeah.
Where everybody pays to have their shit forgiven. That's what reparations is, right?
Reparations, I guess. That is kind of like reparations. It's paying.
Isn't that
because you committed the sin of being racist and enslaving people.
It's reparation, the literal definition of what I was saying. The making amends for a wrong one has done by paying money or otherwise helping those who have been wrong. So going back to Cameron's cooking over there.
Yeah, I'm like.
So going back to what Cameron was saying, it was like everybody's trying to seek this forgiveness from some outside force, but you don't even let go of the point yourself. referring to, and by the way, in Islam, Bible is recognized as a canonical book or like an important book. It's just the Quran is like the final. That's it. But they do value
The
the
Bible's
Bible.
canon. Yeah.
Oh, you mean like the Christian Bible?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like they're like, oh, that's one of the holy books as well. I'm pretty
One
sure.
of.
Islam.
Isn't that
In
kind of
Islam.
just like a way of appeasing the Christians? Because
and it's like, but the Quran is like, you know.
I think
but if
that's,
Jesus said love your neighbor as yourself, what else do we need?
I think
It's that's what's written in every religion. There was like a picture that I saw where it's written in.
No, I know.
every
I'm not
religion.
saying that Christianity is the best religion. I'm just saying it says it there. So why did you need something after that?
But it's like, but going back to your point of everybody just, it's basically all the same thing. But specifically in the Bible, I'm looking up a bunch of different versions because there's a bunch of different versions of the Bible. But basically what it's saying is, is it not written into your law? This is Jesus. It says, Jesus answered them, is it not written into your law? I have said you are gods. Or I said ye are gods. Just a bunch of different.
Ain't ye all gods?
ain't ye all gods.
There's a bunch of different. That's the Texas definition.
That's how Jesus spoke. He was from Texas. You didn't know that?
Do you think he looks like Willie Nelson, but like a few years younger? Or Ted Nugent? I guess that's a better one. I don't know if
And
he's
you know,
from Texas.
in The Secret, it says the same thing. It's like you are all gods, but it's like I talk to a lot of people who are religious who read it as well, and I'm like, just make it personal. Like, take away the S. Like, you are God. Just accept it. And then the cognitive dissonance, like all the programming and like fear and worry and doubt comes up. Like Drake said, just by reading your post that you made, just like, I'm going to hell. You know what I mean? And like
But you're
that
saying
stuff
as
comes
if
up.
it says that in the just normal Bible, it says you're all gods, right?
Yeah, it says, did I not tell you? Or did you not have it written in your law that I told you that ye are gods?
Right. So
And combine
how do
that
people,
with
what do people do with that?
combine that with very truly I tell you, whoever believes in me will do the works I have been doing, and they will do even greater things than these. So let's just take a moment, right? If you believe in Jesus, or if you are a Christian and you followed Christian, isn't that like a cult? Like you venerate like one person?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Like Buddhism is like that's like saying like I participate in
100%.
Drakeism. It's the like
You too?
the veneration of one thing. Are you part of it? Do you have the mark?
I've got a small following.
It's about 2 at the moment.
But it's like literal his name in the like I am a Kianian.
yeah.
It's like I'm a Christian. That's
Yeah.
Anyways, so if you're a Christian, you believe in the words of Christ. If you're a Muslim, you also
Believe in the words of Muslim.
but also of Christ as well. And he's saying, did I not say ye are gods? I tell you the truth. Anyone who believes in me or believes what I say will do the same works I have done and even greater works. He's saying, you can. No, too late. I already took it. Too late.
It's good. Perfect.
Everything that I can do or that you think I can do, or let me say it another way. Everything that you put in of value in God, of what God can do for you and all that stuff, and God will forgive you and God will absolve you all of your sins. God is saying to you, or the manifestation of God that walks this earth is saying to you, bitch, you're supposed to be doing that for yourself. Like you are supposed to do that for yourself, and even greater things you can do of that. And it's going back to that point of what the things that we're suggesting, the tools, DIP Light and all that. It is the process of claiming your sovereignty, claiming your dominions on this earth of you can forgive yourself. And going back to, I know you got stuff to say, but
no, it's fine. I know. It's fine. You're just bringing up a lot of really good points. It's really cool.
Yeah. And this is just coming from, this is you starting this process for me and pushing me to like really look at this stuff, was like really acknowledging that what Jesus was willing to do, what a God would be willing to do, is eliminate of the thing that enslaves him. Eliminate the parts of yourself that you believe is you. Let go of that. So that as a God, as a creator, you can create yourself in every moment and be whatever that moment needs to be. Whoever you need to be in that moment to bring about the best outcome for that moment, for that situation. That's why Jesus, it's not about feeling good. Jesus proved that. He went and flipped fucking tables. right? So it's about being willing to do what it takes and create yourself as that through the words that you want to live. Are you able to live the word angry? Or are you afraid of that? Because, oh no, like I'm afraid of this setting of words. And going back to the synonymity, or I guess the contrast of creationism and evolution, we are creating ourselves. That's why God gave us free will and all this stuff. We can think for ourselves, and now we're aware that we can think. Creationism is using that to create ourselves as the best possible. What was it? Homo perfectus, or did we decide something?
Homo perfectus.
Homo perfectus, right?
That's what we're sticking with until the month of June is over.
We'll decide something new. But the point is like we have been given the manuals of what we have to adopt as principles in order to make a real difference in this world, to create a system. Because think about it. What we're saying is you've been enslaved to a system, or you're enslaved to God. God is a system, but we create gods. We create creators because we're creators. But very simply put, all Jesus is shouting out, he's saying, it's like, he's talking about the living words. He's talking about word as flesh. And it is funky when you read the start of the Bible and it says, and God said, quote, let there be light, end quote. Like, why did it say, and God created light? Or like, and God brought light into existence? It's so specific. It's so particularly written, And I don't know, maybe that's just translation, all that crap, but let go of that. But the point is, don't you choose who you want to be moment to moment? Or don't you have the ability to choose? As in, who you are with your girlfriend, boyfriend is not the same as who you are at work or with mom and dad or whatever. And people are always like, oh, that bitch is two-faced. Well, everyone's a fucking thousand-faced. Because everybody's just swapping in and out of words. But are you doing it on purpose just because something happened and now you're pissed off? Or did you release yourself from all those ties so that you can go into whatever you need to be? And that's what those tools, because the last thing that I want to say on this point is, okay, I know I'm talking about all this stuff now, right? And I would say that I see it quite clearly. But it wasn't always like this. And I know, Cameron, you kind of started that process way back, because as a teenager, as a child, you were very questioning of everything. But I wasn't. I was totally obedient. I was like, yeah, sure, cool. Muslim, God, Allah, let's go. I'm just trying to do stuff, right? But it took a process that I walked step by step to not. I went into reaction. I'm like, why did they force all this stuff? Because we have an oldest brother, Riyadh. Is like, he went into reaction of fuck religion. It's just there to screw you up and all this stuff. But when I let go of that, it's like I can see the validity of what's being said. That if I could see it clearly without all my bullshit of it's some power outside of me, then yeah, it's actually beneficial. But it's when the fundamental point is you're powerless and fuck this world. Just go into the hereafter. I don't know why they call it the hereafter, because the hereafter is right now. Right now. It's you're going to experience.
They're even telling you, it's still actually just here. It's just after.
Everybody's thinking of the thereafter, it's some other place.
Right. Yeah.
It's right because they talk about how you're going to experience the consequence to all your deeds. There's a book of good deeds and a book of bad deeds, and you're going to be graded based on that. Isn't that everything you're experiencing in your life right now? All your good and bad deeds from yesterday? From when you stayed up too late and didn't eat well and shit? Or you fucked up
look
your
at everything going on in the
stuff?
world.
Yeah.
It's from thousands of years of us not taking responsibility. Yeah.
Ken, you have to go?
I'll mention one thing, before I go. Is I remember when I met Avery, it was in Florida, and we were sitting down in this hot tub on the resort, right? And I was sitting with two friends. Both of their names were Oliver, right? And then one of the guys asked Avery, he goes, Avery, and that's your Cameron's business partner. And he goes, Avery, do you believe in God? I don't think I've mentioned this before on one of these podcasts.
No, you haven't. No, it's good.
And he goes, God? He's like, yeah. He's like, do you believe in God? He's like, I don't believe in God. I know God. And then he goes, wait, what do you what do you mean you know God? And then basically, I don't know what Avery said after that, but all I remember is going to the washroom. We were all like taking a leak, going to the washroom, and he goes, "Did you guys hear what Avery said? He said he knows God." He's like, "What do you think he means by that?" Because whatever he said after that just like went way over his head. I mean, it was really funny too. I remember laughing hearing that. And then over time, it's like we actually just looked at the practicality behind it, like what we're doing now, and it was just like Drake was saying also, like what, and Asif too, like what really controls us is just like the money system, like what we look up to, what we look as superior. And it's interesting because on that point of like, you know how like there's a bunch of different religions and stuff, and if one of them were correct, all of the others would be wrong because of like all the interpretations and everything.
Right.
Within every single religion, there's no two people that I've ever met in my life who see their own God, their own religion, their own idol, their own whatever the deal is the same. And that's why they all live the same, what should be taken like very straightforward and very seriously, or like otherwise that specific point, like you cease to exist and you go to hell. They manipulate it and they live it in a different way where they can justify it, where they don't have to follow that thing, you know what I mean? And then it's like, and then if you really look at the practical point of like, you can take like the system as God, whatever controls you as God, or what created you, or your parents, whatever it is. It's like there's a few things that make up of like how we really see God, whether it's like human beings, the flesh, but what really has power and control over you, which is like the system. Like you and I, any one of us could look at like a problem that's happening in the money system or in politics or in education and see the same problem.
Yeah.
That's the benefit of making it practical, you know. That's the benefit of looking at solutions. But yeah, guys, I'm gonna hop off. I'll see you guys later.
See you, dude.
Can.
All right. Bye.
I did want to bring up something about what Asif was talking about with the whole point of, man, you said so much, Asif. You said so much good stuff. But actually, this is actually calling back even further to when Cam was still talking about the structure of your words within you, of whether you believe that you can create a best for all world or not, right? I have also noticed that with the spiritual people, right, they're still from the starting point of you can't create a world that's best for all, and that's why they go into, well,
it's the third dimension. That's like 12th dimension. We'll get there eventually.
Yeah,
We're already there waiting for us.
Yeah. Did you guys know, by the way, we're heading into the 5th dimension right now?
That's what I was
told. I've honestly been told that recently.
Oh boy.
And if you like, you know who you are. If you're listening to this, let go of that right now.
Stop it.
Do you know what the 5th dimension is?
Are you asking me?
No.
You know what it is?
Yeah.
Well, do you know what the 4th dimension is, Asif? Do you know what the 4th dimension is?
I thought it was time, but now I don't know what the fuck.
I thought it was time too. Right?
Dude, Einstein, come on, dude. That guy believed in God. Or I don't know.
I thought it was time, but now I realize that time is something that, well, okay. So we live.
He's gone off the deep end.
But we live in this world, right, where we measure things by physical space and time, and we also measure everything from the perspective of ourselves, right? And so when we're interacting with the world, we can interact with the physical space and what we're doing, and okay, we're going to do this at a later time, but then that makes the 3rd dimension, or the 4th dimension, really your mind. It's where you escape the 3D. You escape 3D, you go into your mind, and then you're in the 4th dimension, right?
Nice strike, nice. What's the 5th? What's the 5th?
That's level 5.
See, but the way people try to define higher dimensions is just, I mean, really look at it. When people talk about the 5th dimension, what do you think that they mean by that? Not the details.
We're like ascending.
They mean like a higher
plane.
Resonance.
Like
what they
vibration.
mean is things are better.
Yeah, I'm at a higher
more
vibration.
Free, everything's better.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing as heaven. It's something that you don't have to do anything to get there. You just have to believe in it and just be patient, and eventually you'll get there.
Yes.
And just be positive and learn your lessons. It's gonna happen. It's not something you have to create.
Yeah.
So basically, everyone is living as if we are not able to create anything, that we are literally just robots.
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
And
Drake,
then
did you
meanwhile
finish your...
saying, I don't want to give up my emotions because then I'd be a robot.
yeah. Did you finish what you were saying before about what you were reflecting back to?
Yeah. Basically, that everyone has that starting point of there can't be a best for all. Even those people that proclaim that they're love and light and they're doing everything,
That's true.
you know, to make this world a better place. But when you actually
But the
have a
laws of
conversation with them,
duality and polarity
But
and
this
good
is
and evil
why
and all that
Right.
they
stuff.
don't have the vocabulary of how to change.
Exactly.
This is why when you go to the website, I think it's on the free resources part, right?
It's just self-perfected.com. Yeah.
Just go to self-perfected.com. You'll find all that stuff. But
Yeah.
you can look at some of the tools that we're talking about. That is the vocabulary. Part of it is the vocabulary of how do you actually change things. You know, and like you said, Asif, about Jesus, it was such a cool statement of when he said, if you believe in me. But what he was really saying, another way of interpreting it, which makes more sense, is if you actually accept what I'm saying as true, that you're a God, that you should do what's best for everybody, then you'll go and you'll live these things and you'll do them and you'll actually do this stuff.
Yeah.
But how many times have you talked to somebody where they interpret that as long as I believe in God or I believe in Jesus, it'll be evident in what I do.
Yeah.
Meaning it's my belief that's important, and then I'll automatically be doing the best things, which is a way of justifying what you're doing and not changing anything, not taking self-direction over it.
That's funny. That's like that little in has completely changed their context within their own minds, right?
But it's a translation of a
me.
translation.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
And you don't even have the vocabulary to understand all the different context of the English translation.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Right.
So people just turn
But Drake,
it into
you're
what
right,
they
man.
want.
That's how I was just looking at it. I'm like, do all of them say in like, but not all of them say in, which is good but a lot of them do say in.
I'm sure the original ones say in.
But the right, like, doesn't it just make sense that what he's talking?
Absolutely.
He doesn't care about believing in him. That's
Right.
not the point. He's saying spread the word.
Yeah.
Like spread the message. Jesus is a message.
But then hold on. But then what is the message?
Love thy neighbor. Do unto others.
But what do most people think the message is?
Oh, just feel good. Just know.
What is it?
Believe
the
in
Bible.
Jesus.
Believe in Jesus. They think
Really?
that's the message.
Jesus wants me to go tell people to believe in him.
Yeah. Believe
Like
in Jesus.
really, he's that
like-
fucking low self-esteem.
Is that what like people think?
No, that is what people think. That's like
They think they're calling as a Christian, and this is kind of across the board. It's just to
Spread the
and then
message.
different denominations will feel more strongly about you gotta accept it, or it's okay if you don't, but I did my duty kind of thing. But it's like you need to accept Jesus as your savior.
Okay.
In other words,
and then that
literally,
solves it.
and it's not the only religion that does. It's just so prominent here in America, obviously in the Western world. Is literally the religion. It's a religion of we're saved. You don't need to change anything. Everything's fine. Don't change it. You don't need to. Don't even try. That's actually what people are accepting. It's not about Jesus. It's not about God. It's about the system has programmed and brainwashed you to believe, and they just gave you some like special group status where you think it's a religion, but really it's just a virus in your mind that's like never challenge anything.
whoa.
That's all it is.
That's
all any religion is.
Yeah. No,
That's
a-
why anybody could take what we're saying and be like, oh, it's a cult, it's a religion, all this stuff. It's not, because what we're saying fundamentally is take responsibility for yourself.
Yeah.
Change yourself, change the system, become the God, the master. Because
Yeah.
if you master yourself, which is what self-perfection is about, you can't be a slave.
Yeah.
But then there can't be any slaves because everybody's mastering themselves. They are taking responsibility. You see, so that's the difference between what we're saying and any possible religion, because any other religion or cult or anything is going to say something that you have to accept that disempowers you. It's like, just accept this part, but it feeds right into your self-interest, just feeling good. Don't change anything. Don't do the hard part. Don't question why you're here.
Can I
Don't
play
change
a
the
little?
fundamental who you are.
Hey, hold on, Asif. Just to go back
Okay,
to the point
go
of
ahead.
Believe in Jesus, right? You ever watch that movie Elf? Like,
Yeah, long time ago, yeah.
Okay, you remember there's a scene where they're just saying you basically have to believe in Santa Claus in order for his power to work. That's essentially what people are doing on the religious side, on the religious scale. They're just going, if I just believe and tell
Then
other
I'll just
people,
be-
yeah,
Hold
you
on.
have to believe too. And then
How is that different than this whole Black Lives Matter systemic racism thing?
oh, it's the same. It's the same. I've seen
Everyone needs
so
to just
many
accept
people-
it, and then it'll change. It's like,
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
going to fundamentally change anything. It's not going to make things more equal. That's not the solution.
It's funny. There's people that I mentioned to you before, like John McWhorter and Coleman Hughes.
Yeah.
They come out and they just say, and they've been saying this for years, anti-racism is a religion. It's a religion. It's not anything real. It's just a religion. It's the modern day religion that people
Morgan Freeman kind of said,
right,
because you keep talking about it, that's why it's here.
Yeah.
But this is why I thought it was really cool to have this conversation about God, because a lot of people will have moved away from traditional religion. A lot of people have moved away even from spirituality or never even participated in it. They're just into
some other bullshit.
I'm a progressive.
Yeah.
Or you know, like I support Trump and Q and all this shit. And it's like, you're just creating things to believe in that there's a plan, trust in the plan, you know, like it's all going to work out.
Wow.
It's okay.
It's
all these rich people and celebrities are getting arrested and executed and all that stuff. Yeah, right. Exactly.
Like how is the system, the way it operates, just putting profit above human life? How is that fundamentally any different than what I'm doing as a human being? Putting my desire to feel good and to pursue happiness above all else. They're one and the same. And if I accept this, I'm accepting this. And I can't change this if I continue to accept this. What everyone does is through religion, through political points, is they complain about the system, but they don't change this. And then so their answer is never going to change the system. So what we're saying is to self-perfection point is you have to perfect the point in here where you trust yourself that you want to do what's best, and it's not a point of sacrifice. The world will be better because of it. So the fear is if I give up my self-interest, then I will lose. You're gonna lose anyways. There's no part in this game we're playing right now with the system as is where you win. You lose. You don't have the life you dream that you could have. Your dreams will always be dreams. And you're going to die at the end of it anyways. Your life will have no meaning or purpose. You'll never experience any level of satisfaction. It'll always be the pursuit of happiness, which means you'll never get it because the starting point is pursuit. So what's the point? Why not just give it up and be like, wait, I'm here in reality. What's actually going on? Why don't I actually do something about reality? But not just like do something, like figure out what the actual issues are.
Yeah.
And what I need to really look at within myself and accept what I've accepted and change that.
Yeah.
As in when he says like figure it out is like you can't use that excuse anymore of I didn't know.
Right.
Like when you become a parent, you can't say I didn't know. Like to a certain degree sometimes, but your responsibility of when you become a parent is to figure out what is best for your child.
Right. Yeah.
Is to figure out the best foods, is to figure out the best education. So you can't claim ignorance. And really what Cameron was suggesting that we all have to let go of is consider that the only reason we do anything right now, or you as an individual, whoever's listening to this, you as an individual, you only do anything for money or to get a good feeling. And sometimes the byproduct of you getting a good feeling is you help somebody. Sometimes. But most of the time, it's not doing any good for the world.
Yeah.
And the point is, are you able to let go of those 2 points? But realizing the practicality of you still need to make money in this world, right? And realize that you can make decisions not just based off what makes you feel good. It's actually something totally different called, I should just like look at what would be best to do even if it makes me feel uncomfortable or scared or if it makes me feel bad of like having to say sorry or like, whatever. Like even on that small of a scale to on the greater scale of like, yeah, it's like what requires is the thing I judge most of every politician is evil and politics is like the most corrupt system is like, that's the thing I have to go and change. Oh shit. Okay, cool. I guess I just have to do it because it's not, I just have to do it, but it's the thing that I see has the most influence and control, and to dismiss it as it's just corrupt and everybody there is corrupt. So therefore this world is fucked forever.
Well, it's like, what would you do in that situation?
Yeah, exactly. It's like
go and actually do it.
It became that over time.
Well, we allowed it.
But that's the point.
We're all allowing it.
It's like, because it became that over time, if we all start allowing something different, we stop allowing
it will
that
change. Exactly.
It'll change over time. I wanted to play a little imagination game, just a little what if.
Okay.
Well, and me and Cameron talked about this a long time ago. But it's like, what if, just for fun, that the reason we're on this planet, it's kind of like a prison. As in, okay, heaven is something
People
where
in
we're-
prison right now going, dude, that's what it is. They fucking prison.
we're all like at home, like locked away and stuff. But in heaven, it's purported to be whatever you want, it just comes to manifestation. Whatever you want, just boom, right? And it's like, let's say we once had that in some other fucking dimension, whatever, before we came here. And we used to have that ability where we just think whatever we want and then it just appears or it just happens. Like, I think I want to be like really good looking, and then boom, it happened. But then we started thinking some like bad shit. Cause like I got some spite towards Drake. So I'm like, I wish Drake was dead. Then he's dead. And I'm like, I wish I could just fuck that girl. And then it's like, oh shit, like rape.
She's wishing like, I wish Asif wouldn't keep looking at me.
Yeah.
Now you have a conflict. Okay.
Yeah.
The
And then-
original sin.
And so let me be clear, I'm not condoning rape. I'm not.
No.
They're gonna chop this up eventually.
But
one
my
day.
point was like, what if their wish is different than yours, right? Then you conflict, right? So now you have two people who can manifest instantly opposing things.
Yeah.
And then that's happening time and time and time again. And we all got put here into this, what I would define physical reality as is space and time. Where you have to move and it has to happen over a timeline. Is that fair?
Yeah,
Like
things
there-
take time to manifest. Yeah.
So it's like, what if that was a consequence of you think some really fucked up things? And if you're honest with yourself, you know that. Why? Because I know that for myself. Drake,
Everyone.
you know that for everybody.
Yeah.
And the reason you got put here in a physical reality, that where things take time to manifest, is because if things manifested instantly, you can't be trusted. And the only way you're going to get to heaven, and I'm doing air quotes if you're not watching the video, but as a concept, is when you can be trusted, where anything you want just comes into existence. Anything you think comes into existence. Well, what would that what would that require of you? What would that imply? That you have to remove all these points of discrimination or inequalities in your head, where you're better than this person, or fuck that person, or oh no, I'm less than, so I need this person to take care of me, and this group of people and all this stuff. Where that's why the actual secret to success, we'll tie it back into success. It's being able to do things consistently. That's it. It's like everybody can like move themselves one time and do the right thing, but we live in a physical reality that is space and time.
Yeah.
And things just take time to come to
Well, and you
fruition.
have the space and time to choose differently. So you have to prove yourself over time.
Yeah.
I'm going to take it even one step further and say that
shit.
you weren't put in this reality. You weren't put in this prison. We literally built this prison brick by brick ourselves over time because we kept making this stupid choice of like not doing what's best.
And then we're
So
like,
we've
fuck,
literally manifested
how do we
this.
make sure that we,
And we've manifested this, and the only way out is for us all to work together and just take what we have now. And like, in other words, instead of trying to figure out how can we go back to a time where we can just instantly manifest anything, be like, okay, maybe we fucked that up. Maybe we now have to deal with space and time, and that's a reality now. So everyone's trying to go to the fifth dimension where they can just instantly manifest. See what I mean?
I think that's the seventh.
But you see what I mean? Like, it's like 7 in between 7 and 8.
Yeah.
But my point is, like, instead of even worrying about that, just take responsibility for what's here and deal with what you have here. Take full responsibility. Why don't we kind of wrap it up here, guys? What I'm thinking is, for those who want to, because we could just keep going down the rabbit hole until forever into whatever dimension. But if you go to the website, I would suggest to go to the website, self-perfected.com, and start looking into the tools that we're talking about, because again, we're just having a conversation within a starting point of self-perfection, within a starting point of a world that's best for all. And how do we get there? And what do we do within ourselves? How do we create that within ourselves? How do we create it without? What's it going to take? What are the tools to use to support yourself? We're not really here trying to give the detailed, specific explanation of the what to do, the how to do it. So that's all there. That's all there on the website. Go take a look at it. Even to the point of the person who says, well, how do I take care of my survival? How do I make more money while I'm also focused on what's best for all? That's all there too. Like, go look at it. Go take a look at it. Investigate it for yourself. Also, the Facebook group, Self Perfected. How do they find the Facebook? I mean, you can go to the website and you can find it
Exactly.
there, right?
On the
From the
website,
website.
we'll have that resource where you can.
There you go. So you don't have to even search it on Facebook. You just go to the website, self-perfected.com, and then you can find the Facebook group where we have a growing community. I mean, it was like last time you guys told me the numbers, it's like double since then. I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
So that's really cool, is to be able to talk to each other. We have weekly hangouts every Friday through Zoom, at least for now. And, you get all that information on the website and the Facebook group. So take a look at that. Join us, join the conversation, hang out with us. And I think we'll leave it at that. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds good.
We'll see you guys on the next one. All right. Have fun. Bye.
Peace.
See you later.